private reason. It says, no, we can do this in public. I might invite.
The ringer on my phone, and I would invite everybody else to do the same thing up in the And now that we've got quiet, I may as well just go ahead and hear it. As many of you may be aware, Mark is retiring after it probably seems to him unnecessarily long and productive and helpful career. I think I promised somebody that I was going to think of some words to say on this occasion, but I didn't, so this is going to be really brief. I noticed that Mike Morgan, who I believe is the chair of the Design Review Board, isn't here to say something. If after I get done, if there's anybody from the Design Review Board who would like to say something, they are most welcome to.
Well, don't poison it, because I have to meet with them next month.
What's that?
I'm still meeting with the DRB next month.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll remind Mike too. So, Mark, on behalf of the Planning Commission and the DRB and the city, you now have an official key to the city. And you have a thank you note.
Thank you. And since I've never been able to say this before, I've worked with many planning commissions, and you guys are a very high caliber operation. I don't always agree with everything you do, but you always have excellent reasons for doing what you do, and it's been a pleasure working with you. And it'll be a pleasure working with you the rest of the evening, too.
Dana, tell you what he thinks.
Okay, two more minutes. Talk among yourselves if you're blind.
This is made out of redwood, and the street signs were all made out of redwood. We took them all down and replaced them, and we make them
I
with
was
keys
told
now.
Okay.
that
I see the
the
haystack
key of the
rock.
city is made out of a retired or what was going to be used but wasn't used street sign.
Street signs, yeah. And I believe they're redwood.
Can't vouch for that. Hold on.
You're correct. Yeah.
It's neat, isn't it? Well, congratulations.
You didn't know I was retiring?
I didn't know you were going to get a key to the city.
I didn't either until just when it happened.
So has somebody made a whole bunch, or is it?
Yeah, I think they make them as they go. Yeah, there's a whole stack of them out in the public works yard, so they.
Oh, I was told this was the last one.
Yeah, I've heard that for 5 years.
Oh.
I think there's actually a pretty good story.
Meaning to read the minutes and never did get formed, so
Oh,
it's not really what I say on it.
well, you
I always
know.
like to see what I say.
Should have brought that up in all of my comments.
No, that's okay.
The hour has struck. This meeting of the Planning Commission is now in session. I'm going to invite Mark to make a short announcement before
So,
we go into anything else.
as we all know now that I'm retiring, I'm being replaced. Jeff Adams, sitting next to me, was hired by the city manager a month or so ago, started work here last week, and everybody in City Hall has been happy to see him here, but nobody more so than me. So I know you'll make Jeff as welcome and as you've made me, and maybe even more so. And he's been fun to work with. In the week we've overlapped, we're going to be working together for about 3 more weeks before I'm out of here. But if you haven't had a chance to drop by and chat with him, please do so. You'll find him a fun guy to talk to. He's got some interesting stories from other parts of the country that I've never lived in. So, so I hope you'll welcome Jeff when you have a chance.
Welcome. Okay, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
I second.
Without objection? Okay, that is accepted, approved. Let's see. I usually have some changes in minutes. Let's get the typo.
Can I make a comment on the minutes quickly?
Yes.
While you're looking at them, we got some direction from the city manager that a bad practice that we have done is to allow members of our boards to go to the minute taker between meetings and slip them changes. And the city manager wants to put a stop to that, and I understand the reasoning why. The minutes that Jill takes tonight are the minutes, and the place to do them is here, the amendments is here in front of everybody else, rather than kind of going back and editing comments outside of the meeting. So that's the procedure we'd like to follow in the future if we can. And that's true for this committee and all committees.
Yeah, that sounds like a good
It actually hasn't been much.
I'm probably the main person who's
And actually, the problem has not been with this committee, it's been elsewhere,
Oh,
but
okay.
that's a rule that the city manager wanted us to move forward with, and I think it's a good practice anyway.
Yes. Okay. Biz Per, on page 5, a little more than halfway down, there's a one-line paragraph that says, Per said she defers. I suspect that you really said that you differed.
Yes.
Okay.
I was wondering about that. I thought, did I defer? I couldn't remember doing that.
That was my guess.
Thank
about
you.
What would be easy to
Thank you for your
mishear.
sharp eyes.
Also on page 8, in the first full paragraph, third line, I think there's too many knots in that sentence. I think that it would be correct if it said, Chair Lundy said that with that cost estimate, he does feel that the charge is not significant in the scope of most construction projects. Well, wasn't going to make a difference, rather than I was sticking with my feeling that was going to
I see
be a
what you're
big
doing, yeah.
deal. Anybody else have
Well,
changes?
what I found lacking was, I didn't see anything
There could
in the
be
text
one, but,
yeah.
about the vegetative management process, and I know we had quite a little discussion about no pruning and no mowing. I know from one of the previous months, there is a notation that it's not allowed, but at least in terms of the last meeting, I don't see any script in there about that discussion.
And have you got a suggested place to put that in some wording that we can put in, or?
I don't know, it's just not in there, and so.
We'd have to go back and find it, but we can do
Yeah.
that and add it and bring these back to you. That's not a change we could do on the fly here.
Yeah, well, okay, why don't we defer until next month, the approval of the minutes?
Differ.
Defer?
This time defer. Okay, so I don't need a reading, I don't need a motion about that. The next matter is a quasi-judicial hearing, a public hearing in consideration of SR 18-04, request by Scott Laird for setback reduction in conjunction with construction of a garage on the vacant lot west of 211 East Surfcrest Avenue. SR 18-04, Scott Laird, the applicant, requests a setback reduction in conjunction with the construction of a single-car garage. The setbacks requested are from 15 feet 0 inches to 9 feet 0 inches along the western property line. The property is located at the vacant lot west of 211 East Surfcrest Avenue, tax lot 200, map 51032 CB, and in a residential medium density R2 zone. The property is owned by Scott J. and Patricia A. Laird. Municipal Code Section 17.16.040.b standards requires a minimum 15-foot front yard setback and a minimum 5-yard setback, side yard, 5-foot side yard setback. The request will be reviewed against the Municipal Code Section 17.64.010 setback reduction provisions established. Does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contact? Has anyone made a site visit? Okay, is there a staff report?
Yes, thank you. Two kind of mechanical things here. First, I put Jeff's name on the staff report, but the mistakes in this are all mine. He really had not much time to review this before it went out. So I wanted to kind of integrate him into the process, but you really can't blame him for anything in here. And then one of the things you can't blame him for is on page 3. I imagine some of you noticed this as a reference to the corner of First and Larch. That's obviously a holdover from the recycled staff report I used to prepare this one, and a complete mistake, so that part can be struck. I apologize for that. This setback reduction is like many other items on your agenda. This is a corner lot. It doesn't seem that way because Highway 101 is so far away from it, but in fact it's on the corner of Surfcrest and Highway 101. So that's a corner lot. It has a different set of setbacks, as you'll recall. The normal setbacks are 15 feet front and rear, 5 feet on each side. Corner lot setbacks are 15 feet on the 2 street sides, 5 feet on the other sides. So this is that corner lot situation, which you should also be familiar with because many of the setback reductions involve that geometry. The typical situation on setback reductions apply here. Some of these criteria are highly subjective. You're going to have to make a determination about whether these have impact. This has an impact on views, that sort of thing. The numerical parts of it, with the exception of setback, are fine. The other item at play here has to do with the subdivision itself. The subdivision was approved in, I think it was 08, first approved, and it was finalized after I got here in 12 or 13. And so this is a newish subdivision by Cannon Beach standards, and the lots are all obviously buildable. The Lairds have 2 lots. I'm going to just call them the north and the south lot. The proposed garage is on the east and west lot. The garage would be on the westernmost of the 2 lots. The house, an existing house, is on the easternmost of the 2 lots. That house is completed now. The picture in the staff report shows it all is still under construction. But it's finished now. You all know that from your site visit. So here's the issue. The house is on one lot, the garage is on another lot. That's normally not a problem as long as they're being managed together. And that's what I believe Mr. Laird's intent is. He bought 2 lots because he wants a larger piece of property, and if they're managed as a single unit, that's kind of a clean project, and it just does look far larger than normal lot. But both lots are separate standalone lots that can be sold separately and independently of each other. That's the whole process for approving that subdivision. So you can sell off one or the other without subdividing it further. They're legal standalone lots all by themselves. And then the question, if you think of it from that point of view, the question is, can you build a garage without a house? And if this was a standalone lot and you didn't own any adjoining property, my answer would clearly be no. We don't allow a garage independent of a house in a residential zone. But this is a different case. This is an owner of an adjoining piece of property who's managing them as his large lot. So that's the distinction I'm making here, and you'll have to decide whether that's enough of a distinction to support this or not. If you do, the other things you want to keep in mind is that at some point in the future this can be sold independently, and we don't want to approve anything that paints us, me, you, future planners, future planning commissioners, into the corner. And I don't think this does, because the lot's large enough, it's not plopping a garage dead center in it or something like that that might preclude future development of the house. But that's something you need to explore too. To me, it appears that we haven't done that if this does get approved and built this way. That is, the house could still be built there without referral of another variance or setback reduction to you. So think that issue through, and if you want to quiz me more on that kind of planning nerd thing that I just explained to you, I'd be happy to talk about it some more, but that's kind of the other issue at play here other than the normal setback reduction material. You do have one piece of correspondence from an adjoining property owner, the Schroffs, that's in your packet, and talk to Mr. Laird, and I think he has some other supporting information that he'll want to distribute with you. That's all I have in the way of a staff report, unless you have any questions for me.
Was there any discussion of joining these two, since they're owned by the same person, just join them into one single lot?
You could do that. You could vacate that portion of the subdivision and weld those lots back together. That's a possibility. If that's
That would
a
solve, I mean, that would solve the problem of having
yes, that would.
driveways and whatever else is going on.
Yeah, that would forcibly cure that problem. You're right.
Or removing the garage if there was going to be a sale of that lot.
That would be another mechanism that would do it too.
Uh, If that lot, the western lot, lot 1, were sold, would it be extremely problematical either for the buyer to grant an easement to Mr. Laird to still have the use of the part of the lot that has the garage on it, or for them to agree to sell that part to Mr. Laird, but it presumably would not be too small a lot. It's not that big a chunk.
The first part of the question about an easement, no, I don't see a problem from the city's point of view on that. I don't know whether this subdivision has CC&Rs or deed restrictions or an HOA rule that might prevent that, but that's not our problem. That's kind of a separate thing we wouldn't be enforcing anyway. The second part of your question, could they actually sell a piece of that lot? Yes, but there's a couple of big asterisks on that. One is you still have to meet minimum lot sizes and minimum dimensions. So in all likelihood, that would be what we would call a lot line adjustment. You don't normally see these. Those are normally approved administratively, but they can be quite complicated in order to keep the minimum, to continue to meet the minimum lot sizes and dimensional standards. Now, that said, that may be entirely possible here. I just don't know. I can't quite imagine.
It seemed to me that it was a good-sized lot.
Yeah, I think it
It's
is,
not
yeah.
gonna- I mean, especially compared to some of the lots, even ones that aren't ones that got
Yeah.
grandfathered from when.
So anyway, that lot line adjustment is a possibility. I wouldn't say it's a definite possibility without looking at it, but yeah, it's in the realm of possibilities. The other thing that potentially interferes with this is right down the common lot line between these two lots is an easement for drainage. And that shows on one of his drawings, this kind of black cross-hatched area.
That's what.
That's a storm drainage easement. And again, it's easy to imagine a lot line adjustment or combination of easements or something that doesn't interfere with that, but it can't be interfered with. So you have to work around that. You can't undo that storm drainage easement. It's essential for the drainage of other lots of the road. So those are things that might make that lot line adjustment or that sharing or that transfer of that garage a little more complicated than normal, but I don't see either of those necessarily as showstoppers.
Thank you. Let's see, we've got the correspondence from
Yes.
Gels Road
Mm-hmm.
and his wife. This is the call for public testimony. The pertinent criteria to be considered and noted in the staff reports and listed on the criteria sheets next to the west door over yonder. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan and municipal code which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, which is tonight, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The Planning Commission shall grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. Persons who testify shall first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
Yes.
Come up to the podium and state your name and mailing address.
My name is Scott J. Laird, and the mailing address is P.O. Box 1100, Cannon Beach, 97110. With regard to some of the comments that you had, I've been in contact with the county after we initially bought the 2 lots. They had talked about the feasibility of combining them as a single lot. They basically said that tax-wise or otherwise, the fees would be somewhere over $100, and that if I wished to pursue it, I could. But in the county, at least the taxation department's opinion, there was no advantage in doing that. So this is a separate issue now where we're talking 2 lots. There is an existing garage. If you did a drive-by, you saw under the house. The lot in question, the western lot, is the driveway that allows access to that existing garage. So I can guarantee there's no way I'm going to sell the property, because then I wouldn't have access literally to the existing garage. Plus with the drainage in there, the available space is only 32 feet on the southern border and 24 foot on the northern border to even try and put a structure in without the setback. So anyway, we're not going to sell the property. I don't think anyone would be able to do much with it, being the case, and it would detract from what we're trying to do, which is just to live there. In addition to the one piece of evidence you got from the Sroffs, showing that they had no, because he owns the property to the south of us and surrounding us, if you will. Tom Meisner, who is building 2 lots above me to the east, I have a note from the Meisner and Peggy showing no opposition to it. Also from Stephen Moon, who is to the north of me. And then the property owner immediately east of us, Mr. Shearer, said he had no objection. And so I've got either both email or notes from them that I can present if you're interested to see. Other than that, I took some photographs, but if you did a site survey, you kind of see, obviously there's a vast area from the property line to the highway, that is state land. And if you did the site survey, you saw there was a shed that was out there on the gravel. Basically, this garage would be in the same area of the shed. It would just get closer to the greenery that I planted. There's a hedge running north-south along that western property border. That wouldn't be disturbed. No trees would be disturbed. It's just the raw land that existed at the time we purchased the land and built the house. So, other than that, if you have any questions?
I don't think I have any questions. I got a comment, but sort of between you and Mark or whoever put the package together, it took me a fair amount of walking around and scratching my head to conclude where the lot line was, and after that I think I was wrong from what you just said. My initial assumption was that it was that the trees to the west were sort of just on the other side of the lot line.
Except for the one where my driveway comes off of East Surfcrest. The lot line basically goes right through that tree, the center of that tree, and then it angles slightly southwest. The lot is not rectangular. It's got a slight angle to it. I don't remember, it was 3 or 4 degrees kick to the southern property line.
We had a bunch of drawings and things in here.
I tried to show the position that the garage would take on the property if this was approved on documents that I gave to Mark.
I'm just being grouchy. Rather than actually contributing, so I'm going to be quiet. Any other questions or comments?
Well, I'd like to go through the layout here and make sure I'm reading this right.
You might want to use this drawing, which at least in my view is the best representation of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got a blacktop driveway that is going
North-south.
to two garages on the house.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And a place, I guess, where you back out and be able to go out the driveway forward. And then you've got this 16 by 26 new garage that you're gonna fit in the corner of.
Yes, sir, and the corner of that lot, the southwest corner.
Okay. And then, how do you access that?
It would be from that same north-south driveway. The overhead door would be on the north end of that 16 by 24 garage.
Okay, so you're going to put in a gravel access point?
Well, there's already, I've got a photograph I can show you if that would help versus the drawings that you have, if I can approach. So this is the existing shed that's on that southwest corner. And you see there's already a gravel pad there.
Ask him for
This is
those,
a
and then we'll have to copy
a
it
hedge
and then return
something
them.
my wife told me to plant. I don't know the name of them, but if you can see, this 2x4 here, which is a few feet in from that hedge, would be, that would be that 9-foot mark from the property line. So basically, that garage would sit where the shed is. It would just sit closer to this hedge. And this is your access point. The overhead door would be right here.
So you put the shed someplace else.
Yeah, I'll dispose of the shed if this is approved and I get to build the garage.
So you're basically trying to get approval to have this garage go into what should be the rear setback of your lot.
In my talks with Mark, he said that I could do a 5-foot setback on this property line, and what I'm requesting is a 9-foot setback on this westerly line.
as
From
opposed to
here,
15.
from here to here,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yeah, it's the westerly line from 15 to 9.
101.
The 101 right-of-way.
And the right-of-way is significantly larger than the paved driving section.
Isn't the standard setback 10 feet from the back of a lot?
No, it's 15 feet in this zone. So the standard setback here if it was an interior lot, it would be 15 front and rear. But because it's a corner lot, it's 15 on the front and the side.
Mistake.
My question is, why do you need the setback? Why can't you just build it, or setback reduction? Why can't you just build it without? the
If I have to do the setback, that would put it into here where I would then lose this ability to back into this
Oh, okay.
area from this garage. It would be,
Oh,
that would come out into this driveway and restrict that access.
Yeah.
So there's no other way to put a garage in this area than to get a setback?
Effectively, that's correct.
And even farther back, you can't, so you go back.
Well, that's correct.
As soon as you're done looking at these pictures, you really should get back to your normal setup. Sorry.
Sorry, just to make sure the audience is aware of what's happening and
And Scott, we need to take copies of those pictures, so if you could leave them with us, we'll make the copies and return it to you.
You bet. I can leave the whole book with you, which also has those documents from Stephen Moon and the Miser.
Perfect.
Oh, so for my question on the record, then, without that setback reduction, you feel like you can't build a garage on the
No,
lot
it wouldn't
that
be, feasible because it would then block access to that south end of the house where there's an existing small garage.
Again, I come back to this notion of why keep this lot separate? Why not just pull them together as one property?
I have
Then
no
you'll have
problem, if that's
a lot
something
fewer
that,
problems.
if that's an issue with the planning commission to make this go, that's no problem. The county said there'd just be, they weren't specific that I can recall at this time, but it sounded like $100, $150 for whatever paperwork to turn it into one tax lot.
Why would that make it less?
Yeah.
Why would that solve the problem?
Well, then
Because it would fit.
it's a little bit more complicated than the county tax office, but it solves the problem because then you can't sell this lot independently
Right.
if you join them.
Yeah.
But
Well, you could apply to.
you could apply to, but it'd have to go through a process again and get reapproved, and then you'd have another bite at the apple, if you will. So if you join them, then you've solved that problem that I mentioned about painting yourself into a corner and creating this potentially unbuildable lot,
But
that sort of thing.
Even if they were joined, you'd still have to ask for a setback reduction.
Not necessarily.
Why not?
Well, it'll depend on how, yes, oh, no, you're absolutely right. The setback reduction is irrespective of whether they're joined or not. Correct, I'm sorry, I misunderstood it there. So the setback reduction be in play, but the joining the tax lots is something you can impose as a condition. The point I was trying to make is that Mr. Laird has, without going too deep into the weeds there, it involves more than creating a single tax lot. You actually have to do more than that, but it's still doable.
Any more questions from Mr. Laird at this time? Thank you.
I do.
Okay. I'll go back, go over here.
Yeah, if they wanted to
Yeah.
rescind something that is enough.
Is there a statement by a proponent of this application?
Yeah, yeah. Right,
Is there a statement by an opponent of this application?
yeah, yeah.
Does staff have any further comments at this time?
If you do get to the point of approving this and you do want to put in a condition about joining those lots, let's have a longer discussion about that. I don't want to burden you with those, that arcana if that's not the direction you're going. But if you do get to that point, let's stop and take a breather and figure out how that might be worded,
Okay.
because it's a little more complex than I've represented so far.
Does the applicant have any further comments at this moment?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay. If the hearing is not being continued, and I don't have any reason to believe that it is, the public hearing is now closed, and we move to consideration.
Okay, I have an issue. And this bothers me for future requests. The unusual configuration criteria, being a corner lot is not an unusual configuration, period. If it was, then there wouldn't be set, it would be every single corner lot would be out of the norm, be applying for setback reductions. I mean, that's not how it works. So that's what bothers me, is that I don't see that criteria being met at all. Is there another way to get to unusual configuration, or is there another criteria that it fits in?
Well, those criteria are on page 2, kind of the top half of the page, and there's
Right?
A through H. E is the unusual configuration criterion. I don't think too many of these are in play other than that.
Unless maybe rehabilitation of the shed. I mean, I guess that's what bothers me the most about this, because if we start saying that, oh, if you're on a corner lot, you automatically have an unusual configuration of your lot, then that's a slippery slope. You're never going to get out of that. And so that's my problem. I don't have any problem with the plans or anything. It's just, and I don't care if it's one lot or two lots. I don't even think that's germane to this discussion. I think that the problem is that I'm looking for a criteria that works, and that doesn't, corner lot. Now, having that state right-of-way there, I don't know if that can be considered unusual configuration. Most lots don't have that. I don't know if that would suffice. I just don't know.
Well, it's a subjective test, you know, it's whether you think it suffices or not. Yeah, but I think you're right, kind of in terms of what we've seen in the past here.
Well, you recommended approval.
Yeah.
So I'm asking you, no, I'm serious.
Yeah, no,
Because-
and I'm taking you
because
seriously.
as the city planner, do you believe that just because you're on a corner, that means that you fit under the criteria of unusual configuration?
No, but the corner lot plus the 101 frontage is a configuration that we've not
Okay.
seen before, that
So it's
you've
the
not seen.
101 frontage, not the corner lot.
Well, I think it's the combination of the two, but yeah, I think it's predominantly the 101 frontage, because that's, as we've said, a very wide right-of-way with a relatively narrow driving surface, quite a little distance
Okay.
between the property line and
Right.
what we would call
we
the
would
common.
approve this, the only way I would vote to approve it is if we made absolutely sure that we were not relying on unusual configuration as our criteria, because, again, once you do that, every corner lot
Well-
is, you know, up for a,
Well, I think once this goes forward, if this is approved, you have created a lot with an unusual configuration. You know, with a driveway that's running into another lot, and a garage that's the only structure on the lot, and it's, you know, considerable distance from the house itself. And actually, it would be, yeah, I can't imagine somebody coming in and trying to put, you know, a pup tent on this corner lot down the road, given the structural conditions, in terms of that huge driveway and this extra little garage. So that's the reason, you know, that, you know, if I'm going to approve this, I'd expect this to be joined as a single property, because all of a sudden, this becomes totally a corner lot, and it would have an unusual configuration, and whatever is here is unusual.
It seems to me that we had, it wasn't on 101, but we had a kind of an analogous situation on Ecola Park Road. You remember there's a duplex, and I'm trying to think how to exactly describe it. It's about a block up from 6th Street. Maybe it was less than that, I think, on the west side of the street. And there was a question of, I think, whether somebody's porch was allowed to be there, and it was way the heck back from the pavement. It was like, well, it was almost in the right-of-way because of the fact of the...
Yes, it is a similar
I think
situation.
it's kind of analogous, and I don't remember which way we decided on that, as a matter of fact, but...
No, I remember the application, and Ecola Park Road is like 101 in that respect. Very wide right-of-way, relatively narrow travel surface, so you have a very broad swath of unimproved right-of-way between the actual property lines, which we measure setbacks from, and what most people think of as the road itself. So that is an analogous situation. Yes, you did approve that one. I don't remember much else about that one. That was at least 2 years ago. The unusual configuration criterion, E, is the criterion you hang your hat on almost every one of these that you've approved. It's not always a corner lot thing. It's unusual sometimes in many respects. You've approved these on small lots, substandard lots, but corner lots have been some of them. That's not the only thing that I believe you hung your hat on. It's usually been several factors, but that criterion is underpinning almost every one of your setback reduction approvals that I'm aware of.
But I don't think that being just a corner lot has ever been.
And absolutely, you've turned down setback reductions where there was not enough depth of that under that criterion to approve it. And corner lot by itself is an example of those where that's just too thin to support it in your view. So if you're going to approve this under unusual criterion, unusual configuration, you're probably looking at corner lot and Highway 101 right-of-way width, and the fact that this is slightly less than rectangular or more than rectangular configuration, and the existence of the already approved driveways. Those are if that's enough, that would be the way I would write the findings, if you would end up at an approval.
To me, the word configuration, just in the general English vocabulary, doesn't seem to encompass the question of being close to a street or highway that's got an extra wide.
Yeah.
Is that countenanced with the use of?
You've never had a deep dive into that, but you've, by implication, understood that to mean more than just geometry, that it can take into account some of these other factors that impact where you might site something on the property.
Okay, so that sounds like a yes.
Well, yeah, I would say yes, but that's based on my understanding of your previous decisions. I don't think you're, I'm confident you're not bound by that.
Yeah, and, you know, this is one of those unusual configurations. You're right, in, you know, the technical term of configurations, you're probably talking about, you know, lines drawn on the map. But, can you stretch that further? I can make a pretty good argument, you know, if somebody were to appeal it to LUBA that, yeah, configuration goes further. You know, would I win that argument? I don't know, but.
At least we have something to hang our hat on as far as relating it to.
If you were to read this and say configuration means, you know, it's setting, you know, the lines on the map in the context of where it's set, you know, and that might get you to 101. But that's something you've got to be comfortable with, you know.
I didn't really think about, for one thing, I hadn't even noticed the 16 by 26 on that drawing, and I was envisioning it being much closer to the house. I did assume that it was in that gravel area. I think I would be at least close to being comfortable with the understanding configuration that way if we had a condition that the houses were, that the lots were to be joined. Somehow the idea that the configuration of the other lot in itself, having said that out loud.
Why?
Let me take it back. No, I take it back.
Oh.
I do think those are two separate issues. One is the unusual configuration, and the second issue is having a lot with just a garage on it.
That's not, I don't see whether there's a garage or a pup tent on it, really is an issue. What I see as the issue is taking a perfectly buildable lot in the subdivision that backs onto another chunk of property, and we make a decision here that we're going to make this lot unconformable, and also affect the potential behind these lots for more lots to be attached into this subsection.
I don't think it does, because there's no, the access to those lots to the south is not from this direction. It is from another direction.
And if I remember correctly, the property immediately south of there is at least platted or whatever, it's subdivided for Jerry Strofe, who has said that he doesn't object to it.
Yeah, and actually, yes, you're correct. Strofes have not objected. They've said they don't object to the neighboring property owner. It was subdivided, but that subdivision was expired before finalized, so it's today kind of raw land. But that design that was approved is likely to be pretty similar to what gets approved in the future, assuming that land is developed at some point. And there is no access at this end of that. Their access is going to have to come from the south or the east on that, not from this side.
Not from Surfcrest?
Well, from the upper end of Surfcrest perhaps, yeah, but not through this property or off of 101 directly.
No, but.
So you're probably,
Presumably from Surfcrest, if there were a driveway going into there, it would seem, I would envision it, maybe wrongly, as being parallel to the present driveway, in between the present driveway and 101.
yes.
Onto Surfcrest.
Yeah, and that's likely to be the case. I guess my point is that there would not be any access through these lots to that property, nor directly off of 101 from behind
The
it.
property south.
Correct.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I don't, it does have an impact on the neighboring property, but it's actually compliant in that direction. And that is very likely the back of those lots too. These lots probably back up on the lots to the south. Now that's all speculative because we haven't seen that development plan, but that's the way the previous development plan was approved, and it's a logical way to lay out those lots as opposed to having another road built in through this lot. It just seems unlikely. I guess it's remotely possible.
So what are the standard setbacks on this particular lot?
15 feet on each of the street sides, on the Surfcrest side and the Highway 101 side, and 5 feet on the two other sides.
And that's because it's a corner lot.
That's the corner lot setback conundrum there.
Well, I don't know if we're to the point where we're entertaining a motion or not, but I would move the acceptance of this on the condition that the lots be joined.
And I'm just lost. Why would that make a difference?
Because,
You
I don't-
still need the setback
exactly,
reduction, yeah.
and, you know, and I'm willing to agree that this is far enough from the highway that there's nothing that's troublesome about that. What bothers me is creating lots that are wacko. And we have a lot of lots already in this town that are wacko. And if you're going to have what basically is becoming a fairly large estate, you know, a fairly large parcel of land, it ought to be joined. And the wackiness kind of removes itself at that point. It's that person's property. It's not going to be, you know, sliced off somehow for somebody else. We won't have to worry, you know, 38 years from now when you know, I'm approaching 115 or whatever, you know, that you know, our successors are going to have to worry about, you know, what kind of structure would be okay to put on this lot and what would have to happen to the portions of the lot that have been consumed by the lot to the east and so forth and so on. I just think it's just bad policy that, you know, if you don't have to, you know, create these kinds of lots now, to think about doing it. And we don't have to, and, you know, for, as Bob said, it's, you know, doesn't cost that much money to do one thing or another. For $100 here or there, you know, it's well worth it to make sure that the lot has some kind of integrity to it. And that's the whole lot, not the, you know, whatever is east out here that, you know, somebody's gonna have to, you know, scrape the driveway out and get a chainsaw out to, you know, cut down whatever is, you know, sitting there.
So you're worried about what might happen in the future when someone might try and subdivide it or sell part of it or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen in the future, and I just don't think we ought to take lots that are perfectly conforming lots and you know, do these kind of strange things to it. And there's a perfectly easy way of solving that problem if you join it together, and then that whole lot can, you know, live and die on whatever decisions the owner makes. And I don't think that, I don't,
Unless he decides to partition it sometime in the future and ask for an outline.
well, we'll have that condition sitting there.
Yeah.
Or remove the garage that they're,
Yeah, or not do the garage.
yeah.
But we don't have a rule about whether you can have own a lot with a garage.
And now that I understand what's where, you know, which I thought I finally did that, but I forgot. I don't, and from Mr. Laird's comments on being able to get in and out of the garages, I don't think that there's given that with that house on that property,
You have a motion on the floor, but not a second.
Right.
okay, I'll at least get to the end of the sentence, or maybe.
Sorry to interrupt.
I don't see a prospect that there's going to be another house on that lot and the present house be viable for people to get in and out of the driveways from what he said. So I don't see any reason not to merge those two. Okay. So who made the motion?
I did.
Commissioner Burke.
Okay, would you repeat it?
I move that we accept this setback, variance, with the condition that the two lots be joined into a single tax lot.
Is there a second to that motion?
So, can I stop me if this deep dive into tax lotology is not helpful? The joining them into a single tax lot is the process Mr. Laird mentioned that you do through the county assessor's office, and that's, although there's a fee and a charge to it, it's fairly straightforward and it's largely administrative. I get notified of those, and if I have a problem or they cause a problem for us, that is, they've created an unbuildable lot or a non-conforming lot, I go right back to the county assessor and say, no, we don't allow that, and they'll stop it. So there are some safeguards there. The more thorough belt and suspenders way of making these two separate lots is to vacate that portion of the subdivision that created those lots 1 and 2, and they would become a single lot with a modified plat, I believe. Going kind of light on the details on that because I'm not sure enough about how the county surveyor is going to regulate that. And I haven't talked to him about this, so I don't know exactly the process that he's going to ask me to do. So the question is, in terms of your motion, you use the words tax lot, which would imply the simpler assessor's method. Is that what you mean? Do I understand that correctly? Okay. And if there is a safeguard there that we're notified of those, we have a chance to respond and stop it if we see that as a problem. We get notified, I think, quarterly or something like that.
With just the change to a single tax lot, they remain separate units of land and they can be sold separate from each other. It does not change anything on the ground. The vacation of the subdivision wouldn't irretreat,
Really?
would change it, yeah. It just doesn't change the fact that they remain separate legal units of land.
Yeah, that's the difference between the two. There's some safeguards in both cases, and in both cases, even in the second case, which I described as the belt and suspenders model, they could come back and repartition those or re-subdivide them. But that would be they'd be coming back to you. That'd be a separate approval process with you. That's the safeguard. The other method, the tax assessor's method, does not come back to you. It's just an administrative matter at the county and an administrative yay or nay from me. Let's make it clear, it's a yay or nay from Jeff. So I guess
So what you're saying is that in order to make sure that this would come back to this body,
you'd want the latter method, the vacation method.
How would that financially affect the city?
Shouldn't,
Tax-wise or anything else?
the effect would be minimal at most. The property right now is very likely taxed as 2 buildable lots. You join them, then they become 2 theoretically buildable lots. That may have no impact on the assessed value because they would still look at those lot sizes and say, hell yes, this could be redivided in the future. And so I believe that's how those would be appraised. I'm not sure there'd be a significant difference. Robin, you probably understand this as well as anybody in the room. Am I close to the mark on this?
Yeah.
So I doubt that would have, if it has any effect on the city's finances or the tax bill to Laird's face, I bet it would be modest at best. And maybe.
And I like that it would be coming back to the planning commission, because circumstances change and all, but it'd still be under our purview.
So I guess my question is which of those do you mean by the motion?
Well, my intent is for it to come back to the planning commission with down the road, there's an effort to split the lots and parcel.
Then that would be the second method,
Yeah.
the partial vacation method.
Okay.
And we can implement that. I can implement either of them, so I just wanted to clear that I understand what you're asking for here.
Okay. With the,
And then,
but with that amendment, is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Is there further discussion this time? Okay, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Johnson,
No.
Commissioner Kerr,
No.
Commissioner Risley,
Yes.
Commissioner Burnt,
yes,
Chair Lundy.
Yes. Okay, so that passes, and we can move on to the next order of business.
I will get the decision document on this out tomorrow.
Okay, I'm guessing that the next matter is one that will be of wider interest. Continuation of the public hearing with consideration of ZO 18-01 and CP 18-01 for new management plan amendments. City of Cannon Beach requests the zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan text amendments, updating the city's 4D management plan. The zoning ordinance text amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of the municipal code, section 17.86.070.a, amendments criteria. The comprehensive plan amendment request will be reviewed against the criteria of state planning goal 18. Continuation of this item has been continued, most recently from September 27, 2018 meeting. The public testimony portion of this hearing is closed. And let's see if I've got the pieces of paper in the right order. I think so. No? Okay. See if I get that here. Is there a staff report this time?
Yes, so at your last meeting in September, you asked me to bring you kind of a compiled, clean version of the documents that you've been working on, the 3 documents, which would be the 4D management plan, which we've been calling the CREST document, the comprehensive plan policy amendments, and the zoning ordinance text amendments, those 3 documents. And those are attachments C, D, and E of this. And those are just clean copies that don't have all of the markup notations on them. And I've got my fingers crossed, but I believe I've captured the changes you wanted from our many previous conversations on this. I guess 2 further remarks. One is, 3 further remarks. One is, if you're making a recommendation to the city council, the full package is actually attachments B, C, D, and E, the 3 documents I just mentioned, plus the Allen report. And that's the whole package that we've been calling the 4D management plan. And they're kind of built, and metaphorically speaking, the foundation is the John Allen report, the CREST plan is on top of that, comprehensive plan is on top of that, and the zoning ordinance is implementing the policies. So there's a sequence and an ordering of that has at least logical symmetry, at least to me. So that's one thing. The other part of this is, as you mentioned, the hearing's been closed. I put together this little matrix that I attempted to show kind of the major changes. I don't know, it didn't work out the way I want. You made many, many more changes than this, and they all have some substance to them, but I really just kind of, this is the 30,000 feet of elevation view of this, and it really doesn't give any kind of justice to the nuance and the detail that went into this in terms of comparing one to the other. So that's there. Your action on this is a recommendation to the city council. City manager has tentatively scheduled a work session with the city council for the 13th of November, focusing just on the Doug Amey report, the John Allen report. And even if you don't finish your work on this today, we may well go ahead with that, because the city council, you've been working on this for 10 months, the city council has a lot of catching up to do, and the sooner we get them going on that, the better. So we'll probably move forward with that work session anyway, unless the boss tells me otherwise, but we've tentatively teed that up to kind of introduce this topic and get them moving on this. If you have, when I plopped all this in front of Jeff, he of course immediately found some typos and things like that in there. And if you have changes like that, if there are a few, let's get them exercised tonight. If there are many of those, let's get those teed up for the city council, rather than if they're Scrivener's errors, if they're at that level. I'm not sure you need to walk through those in order to vote on this tonight. But if you think you do, go ahead. But if there are many of those, and I know there are at least some of them, we can handle those as Scrivener errors outside of the vote if it doesn't really change the substance of what you're making a decision on or making a recommendation on. So that's your call. That'd be my recommendation on those kind of low-level typos and those types of changes.
Well, I have some substantive things.
Okay. So anyway, we're prepared to take notes on and make this the way you want it, so that you can make a vote and get this off your agenda.
Thank you. What I would like to do, and I'm certainly receptive to other people saying that they want to do it a different way, is to turn over the page after that matrix you mark it together, and go down a couple pages, a few pages, to page 1 of the introduction here of the Gami report. And I've got a bunch of markups, most of which are not Scrivener kind of things. But why don't we say, okay, does anybody have anything that they want to say before that? My idea is to go from there down page by page and take people's recommendations and comments and evidence and so forth.
And I have a disclosure though. I was contacted in writing by a local group, Friends of Haystack, or Friends of Cannon Beach, and they pointed out something in the packet, and I looked at it, and it was interesting. So when we get to it, is it okay if I raise it, even though it didn't originate with me, but I agree with it completely?
Seems absolutely appropriate to me.
As long as I disclose, that's where it is.
Especially if you disclose.
Yeah, are we legislative? Yeah, okay, that's right. Yeah, if it's legislative, that's not an issue.
Okay.
If it's quasi-judicial, we'd have to open up the record and let people respond.
Okay.
Good. Okay, I've got a comment on the third paragraph on page 1, which is mostly to invite Darrell to comment on it.
You're on
Does
page
anybody
1.
have something before that?
You're on page 1 of attachment C. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
City of Cannon Beach, 49.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, it seems to me there's some, what it says in that third paragraph that starts although, it seems to me that Mr. Johnson might take issue with and might want to get rid of some of what it says in there. So I'm inviting you to. It doesn't seem consistent with what you said about what happens down in your neighborhood.
Well, I've said many times in the past that there's not a need for more sand down Toll Run. But I'm not sure.
When I'm inviting you to have a say.
That's
here.
already part of the record. I've mentioned that several times.
Okay, but this is something that we are offering to the city council to make part of, it's going to be what, an attachment to the, it's going to be part of the governing documents of the city, as I understand.
Yes.
You already mentioned what I had said in the past, and that is that there is minor erosion in this area. that's good enough for me.
Okay, are you satisfied with the wording that's on that page now? Have that be part of the governing documents in the city?
It's fine with me.
Okay. Anybody have anything else on page one?
Yes.
Yes,
Joe spoke first.
go ahead, Joe.
The goals section here, I just want to point out that it's there, I approve it entirely, and when we get back to page 7 of the ordinance amendments, I will bring this section up again as something that ought to tie into the mandatory reports.
Good.
Okay, and number 5, retain or restore views. And then it goes to view and prevention grading on the next page, and it talks about view of wet sand and are obscured. To me, wet sand brings a whole new consideration to a view. And as a realtor, I feel that view is very subjective. I mean, you could have a view from your bathroom of, you know, the ocean or whatever. And I think this is too specific and should be taken out.
Tell me more specifically. I'm just sort of glancing around in here.
It's the first sentence of the third paragraph on
Yes.
page 2.
Because we had people testify that they, when we had the open hearings, that they were upset because they could no longer see the wet sand. We had other people testify that they were upset that they could no longer see the ocean. So, I mean, I think that if we're going to, I think that's a real problem, having the wet sand in there, because that totally changes what I think our intent is anyway.
What if you just changed it to such that views are obscured? Would say within Cannon Beach, sand is accumulated
like
such
to
that
say
views are
views.
obscured, and that leaves it open.
Views, period.
So we would strike of the wet sand beach.
Yeah.
Okay? Is that the,
I can go along with that, but I would point out that it's simply an assertion about what has happened in the past, and I think it's a true statement. It doesn't
But it's not for
commit anybody
everyone.
to changing that.
It implies that that's what's going to be restored,
Yeah,
or that
and-
that's what should be
I
restored. and I
may be
don't
too
think
much of a
that's-
literalist, but okay. Having gone on the record with
No.
that, I'm willing to have it taken
and
out.
that everybody who bought in at that time had a view of wet sand. We have no way of proving that that is the case. I doubt very seriously that they all did.
Okay, but
Well, the other way of dealing with it is are obscured or enhanced. You know, I mean, it says nothing, but something.
Anyway, I think we should take out the, such that views are obscured, if you want to use the word obscured.
Yeah,
you ought to stop after accumulated.
Or put, maybe
Of the
modify
wet sand,
views.
of the
Some
wet
views.
sand beach comes out of the sentence. And I think that's true, some views makes more sense.
So that some views are obscured.
Uh-huh.
Everybody happy with that change?
so it would read, within Cannon Beach, sand is accumulated such that some views are obscured, period. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have a quorum on that, right? Or, I mean, a
I'm,
majority.
I'm just looking for, I don't think you have to vote on each one of
Okay.
these, I'm just,
Right, just want to make sure that's in.
if I ask that I'm correct, somebody tells me I'm not, then we'll keep kind of talking about it.
Okay, anything else on page 2? On page 3, I've got some things. At the beginning of the second paragraph, I think it's not appropriate for someone like this to say, City of Cannon Beach wants to add something. I think, in fact, the City of Cannon Beach is adding an additional height requirement back in these documents. to protect the community from the effects of climate change.
Or
I-
as added.
Or has added, or.
As added,
Depends
did
on
we do
what
it before
temperature.
this? I don't think so.
No, this is a be a
No,
first.
We are adding it in.
Yeah, you're at it by
making this.
way of this document,
Is
you're adding.
adding, then
Is
it's-
That's what I
Actually,
suggested,
by the
yeah,
change
sure.
of plan
Okay.
and zoning
Well,
code.
It gets propagated through those.
Okay, then a scrivener kind of thing is changing this thing here to a table so that this now says, table 1 summarizes the estimated blah, blah, and I changed the
Okay?
figure numbers below. In the following, the next paragraph, I'm suggesting that we change some of the wording in the second line. So it says, in addition to adding an additional height requirement to the statement of the city of Cannon Beach will ensure that grading does not negatively impact, et cetera. Rather than just we're interested in doing that, I would like to commit the city to that
Oh,
at this point.
That's good. Where's the,
That's right.
Then, right after the table,
okay, yeah, I got it.
second line, has expressed interest in ensuring,
Aye.
I think.
I
we'll
suggest
ensure
we
it's
say
good.
will ensure.
Right.
Okay.
You don't
It should
like
be
that.
ensure with an E, not an I.
I'm planning to leave
Okay.
it to you folks, and it is with an E for sure, thank you.
Yeah, no, don't want to take on that liability.
We don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Now, just for the sake
Yes.
of the English language, this sentence starts off, in addition to adding,
Yes.
in additional,
Okay.
I think we could probably eliminate in addition, the first phrase of in addition, and say,
So you could,
In addition to adding an additional, yeah, thank you.
In addition to
you could just
adding
start that sentence, the
requirements.
city of Cannon Beach will ensure that. You could
yeah.
strike that whole first clause up to the
I'm happy with
comma.
that. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. That's good.
And I'm not sure why we're beating up on this paragraph, but next to last line, I think should start out, any proposal for a grading project with a burial depth, any proposed grading project shall be done. I don't think we want to say that the project will evaluate this. I think we want to say that,
So it shall be
the
evaluated.
proposal shall evaluate.
It's the last thing.
This is the last sentence of that same paragraph. I don't think we want to say that the project is going to evaluate the impact.
Subject.
I think however we word it, I think we want to say that the document that is asking for permission to do the grading should include an evaluation of that impact. Or at least should require it. Anybody have a better way to say that?
Actually, you might want to turn it around completely. The impacts on razor clams shall be evaluated for any proposed grading project with a depth of more than 24 centimeters.
As long as we give a clue as far as who's going to be responsible for doing the evaluation.
Well, the implication here, and the way this would get propagated through policies, is that for you to approve a conditional use, you would have to make a finding that that has been met, that evaluation
That's
is
okay.
satisfactory. It's either provided by the applicant or by expert testimony, but somehow that testimony has to get to you and inform your decisions to meet that criteria. Something like that would be propagated through a policy.
I'm happy with that, Jim.
Do you follow what I'm getting at there?
Yeah, does it have to be a passive sentence like that? Can
Well,
it be an
you-
active sentence?
Nope, yeah, please do. That's
Can we
a,
just say that we're not, that any, no proposal will be accepted that varies with portable razor clams under more than 24 centimeters of sand. In other words, make it essentially one of the, which I think is what we
The
want.
city will not accept any proposal Yeah,
I think this is
that's
getting
active,
better as we go, yes.
active
Okay, Mark,
voice.
can you
The
do that?
city will not accept any proposal
Well,
that,
you probably want to say that the city will not approve a proposal.
will not approve any proposal that will bury razor homes.
Deeper than 24 cents.
Right, deeper than 24 cents.
Okay? Objections? Moving on. Anything else on that page?
On the FEMA fact sheet that we have in our, in all of the papers we've been given, it talks about a primary frontal dune being steep. And I don't think a 2-1 is steep. I'm thinking more like a 1-1, which would be about a 45% angle, would be a better number.
Remind me where the 2 to 1 came from.
It's right here, sand that is.
No, I'm sorry. I was implicitly directing that
Oh,
to
sorry.
our staff and advisors. I think that
Yeah.
probably comes from,
I'm looking to Hannah for this.
yes.
And I don't know off the top of my head.
But it comes from the state or the feds or somebody, I think. Or from,
Or maybe not.
I mean, I either
Because that's about a 26%.
Yeah, I either pulled it from other example plans or from a FEMA document. And it was one of the
Yeah.
first sections that I wrote, and we haven't talked about it since, so I can't say for sure.
2 to 1 is 50%.
A 50%.
2 to 1 is something like that.
Yeah, it'd be
Yeah.
half of 45, or,
Yeah.
half of 45 would be 22 and a half.
50% grade.
Right.
Yeah. That seems
So
like-
I'd like to
that
suggest
seems like
that
shallower
it
than
be
the light
higher,
line.
More steep.
more steep. That's
Steeper.
yes.
Oh, okay. So that's right, that's what you were looking for, more like 1 to 1.
Yeah, because if we could pull that FEMA fact sheet out, it would talk about steep seaward and landward slope.
Well, that's what, can you check that? I mean,
We can
obviously
check,
not
yeah.
right now, but it needs to be checked. To make sure it's not just
Yeah,
arbitrary.
and it may be that you can't stack sand steeper than that, I don't know.
I don't believe it.
So we'll have
That's
to.
what it was seeming like, that it had to do with angle of repose.
Yeah, and we don't, and that's the whole point of the sentence, you don't want to go steeper than 2
There's
to
no point in
1.
putting something
'cause
steeper
it's-
than the angle of repose because it's going to
It's
slow down.
unstable, and that's, I believe that's the
Can
intent
we
here.
double check that?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on page 3? I think there are pages that don't have this much. There are, okay, page 4, I've got something at the end of the first full paragraph, and then we have something before that.
I have something on the board.
You have something under methods of sand removal?
No.
Okay, let me, the last sentence of that, methods of sand removal, if you say may occur between April and June, I would be,
You think that-
I would argue that that means only in May. And so I suggest that we say may occur in April through June. I know there's at least one other place where that comes up.
From April to June.
From is fine. From rather than in?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
You can then do the same with timing of sand.
yeah, it's repeated in the
Yes,
next
the
paragraph.
paragraph after that, immediately. And while I'm at it, in the last paragraph, second line, I think the should may as well be shall there too, as well as the other places where we mentioned.
And then vegetation planting after grading shall be revegetated immediately. I think that we wanted
Oh,
things
good.
to be done
Yes.
quickly after they were graded.
Anybody else on page 4? Page 5.
Just,
Yeah,
don't,
sure.
for some reason, slopping around my head is somewhere else in the document, we talk about revegetation within a certain number of days, I thought.
Yeah,
Well, that would be an implementation requirement. I don't know if you need to go into that much detail here, as long as it's correctly picked up elsewhere.
Well, immediately is not
How about
30 days.
promptly? I think that gives a little more.
as stated.
On page.
Yeah.
How about promptly?
I'd like to have a repeat of whatever was said earlier, if not using immediately.
Right, whatever can we put that
Yeah,
in as a
within
condition that
next-
it gets picked up from?
This
I
is
think
just
you could
like
probably
an
do a search for
introduction.
revegetation or something like that
Kind
and
of.
find that.
It isn't any of the
I was thinking,
ordinance
I'm looking for it, and
or.
more I think about it, more I think
Ordinance
it's
framework.
pretty short time.
Yeah, it is.
I was gonna say 30 days, but I don't think that, I think it's considerably shorter than that.
I mean, if we're gonna talk about when it has to be,
Well, what about within a designated time frame? Because we lay out a time frame in the
Okay.
ordinance,
That's
rather than
okay with
repeating
me.
the whole ordinance in the introduction. It just seems crazy to me.
Okay.
Are we agreeing with that, within the designated or?
Within the designated time frame.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
That's okay with me. Okay. Okay, page 5. And 1, 2, 3. In the 5th paragraph, it says within 25 feet of existing dwellings or structures, and I have a notion that someplace else we say 35 feet, but I'm not,
It's, no, there is a 35, somewhere else in this report.
Where are you?
fifth paragraph on page 5.
Starts fire resistant.
I'm sorry, 4th paragraph. Okay.
Yeah, in some places, it talks about 35 feet.
Okay.
20 feet.
What's that? That's a,
And then
20
that's
feet is a
the-
different thing, I think.
yeah, that's a different, that's
Okay, I think
a
this
different
one was
purpose.
35. And we see, if you can confirm that, but that's at least the consensus of a majority of us from our recollection.
well, the last line in here, so I'll start following with how many days.
What is that?
Vegetation planning specifications are included at the end of this document and shall be followed. So we don't have to worry about this sentence and.
Yeah. Okay, good. Let's see what my problem was on maintenance. I think I've got a couple of inserts to what looks like it's the first sentence. Maintenance will include additional plantings or fertilizer application in areas where plantings will poorly grading and sand removal occur to maintain access routes or for floor slope shaping. And maintenance grading was done on before the Floridian crest. And that, I thought I was getting a confused sentence improved, I'm not sure I did the job.
I think maybe what's there is better.
Maintenance will include plantings or fertilizer application in areas. Maybe this and where maintenance grading Fort Union Crest.
Let's pull it out as
Let me
bullet
read
points.
that again.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be and where maintenance grading has been performed on the Fort Union Crest, but this is getting to the point where bullet points might be a better way of dealing with this.
What would be?
This sentence, I think you're correct that it should be where maintenance grading has occurred on the Fort Union Crest, but this sentence is getting
I
to the
wouldn't
point
have an
where
objection to making that bullet.
bullets might be a better
Yeah.
way of presenting this at this point.
Yeah. Anybody else have something on 5?
Oh, well, I think we have some kind of measly language in the last sentence of that first paragraph on maintenance. Generally, the responsibility of, what does that mean?
Maybe that, I had a mark in the margin, but I couldn't remember what, maybe that was the,
Is it the responsibility or
Our
isn't it?
responsibility?
I think that's what we've been trying to get at all the way through this
I
document.
like that better.
And it should be that the city hires someone to be an independent party.
We do that later.
Yeah,
That's in the implementation, isn't it?
Yeah, we do it later, and I'm not sure this isn't the place where anybody would be looking for that anyway, but you're right. That is addressed.
So are we agreed to take the word generally out? And then-
Yeah.
Okay, good. Uh,
And
Yes.
I just want to
Yes.
double check on this. This would be paragraph 3. I know in our minutes, we said that we would take out listed trees as secondary plantings. And is the tree lupin considered a tree?
No, it's
Okay.
at best a shrub.
Okay,
Anything else on 5?
no.
Okay, who's got something on 6?
In the first paragraph, they're talking about affected areas should be inspected at least annually for a period of 5 years after grading. Is that consistent with, because I read in other
There's
places it
there's
says
something that
2.
seemed to mitigate that later on, and I had a suggestion about the place later. I think, it seems to me that was, I guess the question is that what we want to say, at least annually for 5 years? And it seems to me it was. Does it sound like that we're talking about the same thing?
Yeah,
Okay. Do you agree that we do want it to say this, and if it says something different someplace else, we want to change it there?
okay.
Okay.
See, I didn't think that we were covering an annual inspection. I thought the first 2 years.
2 to 4, 5.
Well, it's tied to monitoring, and I don't think we would want to accept a monitoring report that didn't at least have an inspection tied to it.
Right.
So I think to fulfill that 5-year monitoring obligation, you would at least have to visit the site for each one of those monitoring reports and do a site inspection.
But it would be an annual monitoring?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
And you might, I guess you might adjust the start date depending on the plant date when the work is done, but yeah, and once you've set the start date, that should just be every 12 months.
That was my recollection. In the second paragraph, there are a couple of shalls in place there are 3 shalls in place of wills in the second, third, and next to last line. I think those are probably not very interesting. The 4th line from the bottom of that paragraph where it says, including shellfish and rare species, I want to support Joe's care for the tender razor clams and say, including razor clams and other shellfish and rare species.
Razor clams are shellfish. I'm sorry.
Other things on page 6. Page 7. Anything in the first couple of paragraphs? In the limitations paragraph, I have tried to get rid of anything in here that says recommendations. And so I'm suggesting, and because it seems to me we had a discussion and said that what we're doing here isn't, what the city council will be doing if they adopt this is not recommending things, but laying down the law. So I'm suggesting that we change the first sentence there to say, this 4 dune management plan is based on, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's great, yeah.
And then also that we spell out what Bucharest is under a Estuary Study Task Force, because this is the first place that now that they're no longer undercover, that we're encountering them.
And so where it says the 3rd line, that recommendation's gone too.
Let's see.
Should events occur which alter systems such as erosion.
Thank you.
This document may need to be identified.
Need to be modified.
Yeah, I just
Conditions,
started with this
something
document,
like that.
such as erosion, this document may need to be modified.
Yep.
Erosion. Should events occur which alter existing conditions, such as erosion. Thank you.
And then again, with further, just like I think Mark just
Thank you.
said.
Okay.
Mark.
This
yeah.
document,
Yeah.
thank you, Mark. This document is modified.
What does that mean, Crest is excluded from responsibility? What exactly
Well,
is that?
It had to do with when, this started, Crest prepared the first draft of this document, and it's devolved quite a bit. It's really your document at this point. And you probably can, if we're taking Crest off the cover, you probably can also delete that sentence, because their involvement really is limited to the first draft of this. And
It
this
wouldn't
is-
matter anyway. If someone wanted to sue Crest, they could sue them. It wouldn't matter if it said that or not.
Lawyer can sue anybody, yeah.
So, yeah, so just take it out.
I think, unless there's something in there that I'm missing, I think that last sentence in that paragraph could be removed. Because,
Would either of the people from Crest have any loud objections to our taking that sentence out? Okay, thank you. Similarly, on the next last line of that page, I changed recommendations to directions. Does somebody have a better word for that?
That's good.
Anything else on page 7? Oh, let's see. One more thing. Third line from the end of the Haystack Rock paragraph. There is no development within the zones of the management area. However, development surrounds the management area, doesn't surround the management. The eastern beach. And the beach is highly utilized. Anything else on that page? Anything on page 8?
fix that sentence further on 7, that's fine.
I beg your pardon?
I think they have to fix that sentence a little bit more on page 7. They can do it, just as quickly as that.
At the
Which-
end?
Yeah, but I lost which sentence you're talking about.
There is no development within these zones in the management area. However, development surrounds the management to the east and west. So he said, however, development,
Surrounds the management area to the east and to the east,
right.
comma, if I were applying my own
Then it's
conventions
not
of commas,
is-
there would be a lot of change.
Right, and then if it's not, is highly utilized then, because that's.
And the beach is
wrong.
highly utilized, comma, and the east, and
Okay.
the beach is highly utilized.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Anything on 8? Anything on 9?
That drawing, figure 3 is kind of barely visible, and it's
Right.
important, so when we get to actual production of this, we'll make sure that that's,
You don't have to put on optivisors to read it.
well, you have to use some imagination too, but yeah, I'll make sure that's clearer than it is in this drawing.
Next to the last paragraph on 9, same change to objectives and recommendations becomes objectives and directions, or something. Somebody's got a better word than directions. Actually, the next sentence, to clarify this, with the exception of changing the boundaries of subunits 1 and 2, new conceptual alternatives are not considered. I think this is talking about the change that we made sometime back
Yes.
between those. I think that's not clear here, with the exception of there having been a change in the boundary between subunits 1 and 2. Does that capture?
That's more accurate, yeah. Or prior changes or previous changes to the boundaries.
Some, in between the Mara report and the present date.
What we could do is say, with the exception of previous changes to the boundaries of subunits 1 and 2, and we could parenthetically or as a footnote just reference those ordinances, because they were both done by ordinance, and it might be
Even
useful
better.
that somebody, I know where those ordinances are.
Yeah.
but
Okay.
It would be helpful to Jeff or other people implementing this in the future to know what those actually were.
Anything on 10? Anything on 11? On 12, at the middle of the page, under conceptual alternatives, objectives, and directions, or something, this basically I have to do a global search for recommendations. 13, I've got an addition to the next to the last line of the first paragraph. Residential development surrounds this management unit to the west and south. That's kind of, it obviously doesn't completely surround it. Is that a true statement, west and south?
Well, the west is the ocean, so.
Yeah.
To the
South
east
is
and north.
Ecola Creek, and there's beach along there.
Yeah, actually, the residential development closest is to the north and east.
Okay, what should be the change? Surrounds this management unit.
To the north and east would be what I would have said, unless you're also.
No, because then that Chapman Point has a.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. So
Okay, I see what you're getting
at.
I was looking at the wrong thing, yes. Residential development surrounds this management, at least to, yes, to the north and east, thank you.
Well,
Sorry?
I don't think we should bring up the residential development to the north, because that's Chapman Point, and they have something written to their deed that precludes them from being part of this particular plan.
But
So I just
this
don't-
is analogous to what we've got in all of the other areas, like saying that there's commercial development to the east of the beach in downtown.
I know, but I just think that that's giving it, I think it's
It gives
dangerous.
it more importance than it
Mhm.
needs to.
Well, you might want to just strike the sentence then, because it wouldn't make sense to say it's just to the east.
Right.
I don't think that anything is lost by
I
striking.
don't think anything's lost. It just loses some symmetry with the other. I'm willing to have that go away.
Same story on this map, I'll get one in there that's reproducible.
Yeah. 14. At the top of page 14, it's the recurring objectives and recommendations. The last paragraph before maintenance program, I had a question mark next to because, let's see, this unit is the most northern management unit, and we're talking about Breakers Point. Okay, that's true. If current trends continue, this area will continue to accumulate sand. The scope and timing of the sand management measures outlined above are intended to minimize adverse impacts to these adjacent areas. What adjacent areas?
Actually, I think you could just say minimize impacts to adjacent areas.
Okay, adjacent to,
What is it? What is
adjacent
that?
to Breakers Point?
Adjacent to the management unit would be my read of that.
Okay. Advise, oops, minimize adverse impacts to this management area? That makes sense. Scope and timing of the sand management measures outlined above are intended to minimize adverse impacts to this management area.
That makes sense to me.
To the Breakers
Okay.
Point subdivision.
Is this a controversial statement? Because I think,
If you say this management area, then that, how is that controversial?
it's not controversial with me, but I think
I think that we were really talking about areas outside of the management area.
To the adjacent Breakers Point subdivision.
Well, or, I think we were talking about where the sand is gonna go that's not going on to Breakers Point. I think we were talking about,
that would make sense with the existing wording.
yeah, exactly. And that's an issue, you know,
Now, the following sentence talks about impacts to adjacent properties.
right. Exactly. And that's what that's about.
Adjacent properties are minimal.
You know, we can't have plans that are designed to, you know, dump, you know, 80, you know, cubic yards of sand in everybody's gutter.
Well,
You know, that's something.
I think we do. Maybe not in everybody's, but a lot of folks along that, you know, in Breakers Point and at Chapman Point.
Well, and behind Breakers Point too, you know, it's, you know, do we save the views or restore the views or, you know, whatever with a dune management plan that essentially just has the wind sucking all the sand further north or further south or wherever it's going to be sucked to. And I think that's what that's why that's written that way.
I'm calling attention to, first of the fact that it said these adjacent areas and it wasn't clear what adjacent areas.
Right.
Do we want to say adverse impacts to area adjacent to Breakers Point Beach there? Or do we want to say adverse impacts to Breakers Point Beach? Or neither one, I don't know.
I think that this is essentially a throwaway sentence that gets attached to, you know, whatever area is being besieged by bulldozers or dump trucks or whatever. In other words,
Impacts in the area.
Minimize adverse impacts. in the
Period.
area. Period? Okay.
Yes.
okay,
Also, I'd like to jump up to the sentence, which is the third paragraph. Due to high sand accumulation, regrading may be warranted in these areas on a regular basis. I'd like to take that out.
What's the feeling?
I think that's a piece
And
of
in that
wisdom.
case, we would take the following sentence out too.
Yep, I agree. I think that's smart.
Is there?
Yep.
Yeah, because it's just the way it reads.
Yes. Okay.
It's setting
That's another one of the
things up.
cases where, okay, I don't have any objection to that, but I was expecting that other people would. Okay.
And then I have a question about, where is the fence line?
Where's that wording?
Okay, that's the next
Fourth
paragraph.
paragraph.
And directly west of the fence line. I don't know where the
Yeah,
fence.
thank you for calling attention to that. I sort of said what?
Yeah,
and Mark.
I
Yeah.
believe that's an artifact from the earlier report, the Rosenfeld report, but I'm not sure where that is today.
Could we
Would
find
you-
out
Yep.
Fix
a
that.
little
Thank
bit
you.
about that? And also, with the exception of a 35-foot wide unvegetated buffer strip, I worry that that is going to allow sand to go everywhere.
Well, the answer to that may be in the answer to the fence line question. I'll have to look at Rosenfeld to figure out what that
Okay,
was. I
yeah,
just
so
don't
that
recall.
whole sentence will be
Thank
a
you, Rose.
question. Okay, great.
Other things on page 14. Last paragraph. Secondary plans will be established in backslide and intervening areas. This shall not be done until initial stabilizing vegetation is well established. Okay?
Yeah,
Page 50. Page 16.
Note that on 15, there's that 2-to-1 slope issue again.
Right.
Yeah.
It crops up in a number of
That-
places.
Thank you. And then on remedial grading, we're talking about the rear yard sand and the 10-foot line. Is it 10, 20, or 35?
It's 20 feet from the structure.
So from the 10-foot line, they can,
This is 10 feet from the structure they can grade.
Yeah, well, 20
they
feet for,
should be able to
you
grade
you
from.
can grade 20, under this regime, you can grade 20 feet, but when you're outside of the 10-foot area, you have to start sloping it down so you don't end up with a cliff at the end.
Okay? Page 16, under plan monitoring, a little more than halfway down.
Can we go up
Of
the top
course.
paragraph?
Yes, please.
In a sense, it starts out preferably.
Should be used.
preferably, you know,
Graded sand.
if it's our preference, why isn't it what we expect?
However, graded sand may also be used to enrich identified areas.
You could just delete preferably and start at the sentence,
Yeah.
graded sand.
Does that satisfy your,
Yep.
oh, thank you. That was easy.
And I'll put my oar in the water, the next however really doesn't need to be there either. It's not a contradiction to the previous.
Right.
Good. Down past, halfway down, plan monitoring. The city shall complete plan monitoring reporting after the second, fifth year. I get uneasy on things here that says the city shall, this is something that I think I brought up last month about, is there a way to build something in that says, you know, somewhere, who makes sure that this happens?
Yeah, you and I talked about this earlier
Yeah.
in the week. So here's my thinking on this, and I'm going to ask Jeff to put his oar in the water here too, because he and I talked about this. We've had not a good track record of following up on these kinds of things, because we don't have a very good system for, people used to call a tickler file for these things that recur and off in the future, some faraway date. Sometimes from us, a faraway date is like just a week away. So we haven't had a good way of doing that, and I asked Jeff to bring his fresh set of eyes to bear on this. We do have a couple systems that might be helpful here. One is our permit for, we have an electronic system for managing building permits, because those are things that have these kind of enforced recurring visits to a site, for
Yes,
instance,
sure.
during the life of a building permit. And we can adapt that, I think, to do what we're talking about here. And the reason we haven't is my lack of vision, but also it's just these things don't require a building permit per se, so they don't end up on that side of the house. This is just an artifact of the fact that we kind of all work in silos here. I don't know if Jeff, you want to expand on that?
No, I just think that, you know, there's, the Cassell system they're using has modules that I think are a little underutilized, and they do have those kind of calendar components that you can put expiration dates that will kick it over us.
Can we trust you to do that, please? Thank you. That satisfies my concern there.
It's the answer to a question that'll come up on tree removal too.
Yes.
And I think it's a good use of Cassell, and we really have underutilized that system. It really is far more powerful in our use of it, so I think it's a good idea to take advantage of that.
Some of it is lovely flyers to put up.
Yeah, but this is a way of managing that, and you know, you still have to put out those fires, but if you can confidently enter something and then just know that 6 months later it'll kick it back at you.
Your life is good.
My second comment, a few lines down, is sort of in the same neighborhood. I'm suggesting that we add to the end of item 2, so that it says, listing of any management unit project monitoring reports that is supposed to be submitted by project proponents, but were not submitted, and what action has been taken by the city. So that this is monitoring and reporting. And I think not only do we want a list of what the applicants and I'm suggesting maybe should be called permittees, or there should be some word other than proponents, but that's a different part of the question. Is that agreeable to people that we build in more things here also about
Yes.
accountability? In that sentence, and also in the third sentence third line from the bottom of the page, we've got the word proponents, and I think we need a better.
Permittee
holders?
Yeah,
Pardon?
permittee or permit holder,
Okay.
both work.
I'm suggesting permittees, a permit holder, something,
What's wrong with proponents?
I beg your pardon?
Why do we have proponents?
Because there probably half the people out here are proponents, and I don't think we need to hold them responsible. I think it's,
Proponents for, refers to the people who asked for the permit.
Not in my vocabulary. Proponents means people that are in favor of something.
Yeah, who requested the permit.
No. I don't think so. I think it's broader than that. I think that, I'll look it up if you like. It may have, maybe in law, it has a more specific meaning. But I think, for example,
Well, applicants then. Is that better?
uh,
Grading project applicants?
well, they're no longer applicants once they've got the permit. I think it's something like permittees or permit holders or something like that.
It doesn't matter to me,
Okay.
as long as everyone understands.
That it's those guys. Okay.
One thing-
Anything else on page 16?
Yeah, it says annually in the spring, and other places, it says annually.
I'm sorry, where?
Just the last.
Oh,
line.
yes. After reading
So,
the-
I'd like to be consistent whether maybe it should be spring or annually or is.
And just annually? I don't have any problem with that.
And should it be in the spring?
Project proponents.
But it says different things.
Right.
Parts.
Well, actually, it would be, the reporting would be more accurate if you were to do it in the fall than you would in the spring, if you're monitoring plant development.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, why don't we just take in the spring out and, trust to you guys who are going to be here after I'm gone, and future members of this body to incorporate something in there about when that's supposed to be.
It's the one thing about staying in the spring, and I don't know, beach floors start showing whether they're resilient or not in the course of the year. But it seems to me after the winter storms, it would give you a really good sense of how effective the project had been.
I mean, my thinking is we're going to have to give this revegetation a full year before you know how successful it is. And so, and if we're talking about doing revegetation April through June, then, yeah, you could do it in the spring after the winter. But the second year, what I'm thinking of is the rate of unsuccessful planting would occur in the summer months. So, as long as there was a second spring, fall, that was happening.
As long as it doesn't interfere with tourist season.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else on page 16? Page 17, yes.
Okay, where it says qualified professional, do we need to say independent professional hired by the city?
Zoning shall be completed.
Not by the applicant.
I guess that's a matter of what do we want?
Do we say that later on, when we lay out the rules?
Not that I recall. I don't remember who that person is responsible for.
Well, I believe the way we want this, I believe the way you wanted it set up is that the applicant has to hire their own qualified professional, and we hire a qualified professional to evaluate their work. I don't think we want us out there doing their monitoring for them. I think we want them to we want them to do the heavy lifting, and then we evaluate their reporting.
With our own professional.
their professional does their monitoring, and we use a professional to evaluate it. It's kind of analogous to the way we do tree removals. Their arborist recommends stuff, our arborist reviews their work. So that's kind of the model I think we're looking at here.
That makes sense to me.
New jobs.
On page 17, after the 1, 2, 3 list, I think this is at least one place where we've got what seemed like a mitigation of the requirement of monitoring for 5 years. If there is no significant change in the measured profile, 2 years after grading, then the profile measurement frequency can be decreased accordingly. However, the site shall at least be visited and inspected annually for the 5-year period. So, what do we want? It seems to me that we were really pushing for we were saying there should be monitoring, however that ends up getting defined, for 5 years.
Well, I think we should eliminate the decreased frequency can be decreased accordingly. I think that's the wrong words to be using.
Well, in that case, I'm thinking maybe just take the paragraph out because the however clause doesn't make a lot of sense without the one before it. The failure to submit the required monitoring reports doesn't have anything to hang on without those.
I agree.
I don't think we need it.
Okay,
So I think the last sentence is substantive, but it's repeated elsewhere.
yes, exactly.
So you're saying that whole paragraph, starting with...
That's what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Okay?
And wherever that's repeated, when we talk about the result in a penalty, I think it's incumbent on the city to define what that penalty
Well, that's in the code.
Yeah, I agree, and I hope I have marked those. And here we're saying what it is. Will prevent future grading permits to be issued for the area for a period of 5 years, beginning after the monitoring reports are brought up to date. I think that this is the place where that's spelled out, but we need to spell it out. Do we need to say, give you direction to spell that out as it is here in, we're taking it out here, but we do want it in the other places.
Well, when we get to one of those, let's talk about it, but I think
Okay.
I think the substance of that is repeated, but we'll find
Not
out.
always. I'm
Okay.
not sure. Okay. I've got a note here under planting stock. I've got a question worksheet. Location of each species shall be detailed on a planting plan that is submitted to the city. Should the city have a form for this? It seems to me that would be useful. Should the city create a form for that?
We could, yeah, then at least we'll get a uniform
Yeah.
style of reporting that we don't have to decipher from independent.
Okay,
different-
so I'm just saying, I'll leave all of this stuff.
The form stuff usually doesn't show up in code, so that's just advice
Yeah,
from you that
exactly.
we would develop on our own.
Anything else on that page?
I hope that when the city council looks at this, that they have more information about the different kinds of grasses, because it's really confusing. There's an American dune grass, there's American beach grass, and I don't think we've really had the opportunity to dig deeply into that.
Yeah,
So,
They're going to have the Allen report.
well, and I think you're right. I think that guess two things. One is that the way the city manager
Because
is.
one's invasive and one's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, no, there's, that, the vegetation aspect of this is a topic all by itself. And I
Yeah.
believe the way the city manager is envisioning that we roll this out is kind of in subject chunks, with the Allen report coming first, but there would probably be a work session on revegetation, a work session on disposal methods, that kind of thing.
Could Hacker come and talk to us?
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. But I think you're right, though, the council needs to have a pretty deep understanding of this in order to make an informed decision.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
I think you should insert the 3 grasses that are listed under the footnote on page 5. The footnote under 6, you have the 3 Latin names spelled out for those 3 grasses that you're talking about. That should be inserted into this list of plants.
On 17?
On page 5, the footnote,
Right, yeah.
yeah, okay, well, down, the footnote under 6, they list all 3 of the
Mhm.
grasses. Those 3 should be inserted
Into the planning stock
Yeah,
paragraph.
yeah.
So we want to add the eastern grass,
Yes.
and then you asked me for something else there?
Footnote on page five,
Okay, add-
footnote 6.
Do you just need the footnote, or
Or just
We don't need the footnote, you just need to add the 3
Things
species.
that are
the other species? We've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
the 2 here.
Right.
I get what you're saying.
Page 18. When people read the first, the item number 1 under planning, and see if that first sentence is understandable for other people.
I don't know why there's a 10-pound bump, I mean, wait, on the first one, when we're talking about sorted and bundled and weighing approximately 10 pounds, I don't know why that's in there.
This is down in...
No, this is the very top.
Oh, okay, let's see. I thought it had to do with how much somebody can comfortably carry. I don't know.
Oh, okay, well,
That was like, okay. I don't, if I were carrying those things, you know, one in each hand, I would, 10 pounds, it sounds like a comfortable bunch of grass to carry. I don't know, that was just, I didn't circle it or anything for that reason.
no, it just seemed kind of odd to me.
maybe kill off the plants if they have to be grouped in bundles that weigh more than 10 pounds.
Say the beginning of the sentence again. What?
I'm saying, maybe if you have plants bundled in more than 10-pound bundles, it strangles them or something. It's damaging to the plants. I don't know where that number comes from.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either. It
To
didn't bother
me, as long as it's being stored in the cool storage temperatures, then I don't think it would make any difference.
It seems like a lot of detail.
Do I hear a suggestion for a change there? Okay. Now, back down to under planting. The grass shall be planted in hills with an average of 3 live culms, stems, per hill, with no fewer than 2 live culms in up to 10% of the hills. So, up to 10% of the hills means it can be 2. Two of them have to have at least 2 live culms, and the rest of them don't have to?
No, 2 live culms can be in 10% of them.
Yeah.
And the average has to be 3, so, somewhere between 2 and 4, and it'll average out 3. I think that's what that means.
The idea is that you don't get a bunch of one column per hill hills, and I'm gonna make it up by putting 20 on this hill.
Oh, okay.
It's to ensure a roughly even distribution.
I mean, I'm having problems with the 10% hill.
No
Might be-
more than 10% of the hills can have
With at least 2 light homes and
Basically, I think what it's
90%
saying
of
is
the
that
hills
we want
would
Yeah.
3 of these suckers in
make
each
it
hill.
positive instead of
But
negative.
if
10% of the hills can have 2.
Yes.
Can you say, you can say it positive, that 90% of the hills have to have at least 2.
No, 90% have at least 3.
Have to have more than 2, yes.
Oh, at least
More
3.
than 2.
Yeah, does that make it
More
clearer?
than 2. Yes,
Yeah, that
can you make it say that?
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Anything else on page 18? Page 19. I've got a suggestion for enlarging the first sentence on that page. Transplanted clumps of beach grass salvaged from foreground areas that are lowered for view may be used in place of the, quote, planting stock, unquote, described above. They can survive and grow adequately and can be less costly than traditional plantings. Transplanted clumps of beach grass salvaged for view grading can survive. Okay, it seemed to me that that was the point of talking about this in here. That whoever wrote this had the idea that you could make use of these, but they're not actually saying it. And I think if we want that in there, we should say it.
Yeah, no, I follow what you're saying.
Do we want it in there?
I think we don't want it in. I mean, what you're referring to here then is replanting European beach grass, and that's what we're trying to get away from. And that's what they would be utilizing.
There's some, I can't point where, but certainly there are some places where it says that it does, we are calling for planting European beach grass
Right.
at some places.
Right, but we're also calling for alternative
Yes.
grass.
Okay, what's your pleasure? You want to just get rid of this?
Well, I think it makes sense to use whatever you can, instead of just dumping it.
Well, maybe, maybe not. I mean, if you're pulling up plants, who knows where the, particularly if it's been established, who knows how far down that root system really is viable. And if you were going to pull up European beach grass, it may not have fibrous roots that are at the surface. They'd be further down.
You're saying it doesn't work to do that?
It may not.
But isn't this sort of assuming that you only do it if it works?
Well, if you were digging this up and you were a qualified gardener, you'd look at it and you'd say, no, this doesn't have, this is not going to work to transplant.
Right, and so you
So
will use
it's
it.
something to, yeah.
Right.
So, but,
This is giving permission.
Is that case by
Yes.
case?
I mean, I just like to have, I think it's good to have a sentence that if it's viable, do it. If it works in the area. I don't know, rather than, I mean, it just sort of encourages the recycling of stuff you're picking up,
Recycling of European beach grass.
Well, in the places where where it's gonna be used, obviously, not anywhere else.
Is there something, kind of like a consensus about adding that in there, saying that you may use it in places on the planning, stuff in the planning stock list, which I think is back on page 22. Doesn't matter. It's a fairly big heading.
Yeah.
How about healthy beach grass? Salvage.
Healthy beach grass.
Beach
Okay,
grass,
I've got no objection to that.
I have no objection.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can you read that sentence again that you
Yes.
inserted, just to make sure we've got it
You'll have
correctly?
this
Yeah.
copy.
Yeah, okay, then you don't need to reread it if we're
Okay.
gonna give it to us, it's fine.
In the next paragraph after that, just 2 letters on the first line, the areas where this plan allows for dune grading are backed, passive, by the ones for Ocean Avenue. I doubt that anybody has changes, whatever objections to the references on pages 20 and 21, but if they do. Okay, I don't think we're going to make any changes to the statewide planning goals, so we can pass over those.
So when you get to the policies, the policies attachment D, some of the work you just did in this document is going to propagate
Sure.
here. You don't need to repeat it, I'll just bring it forward.
Good, I may point that out in some places that we can just skip ahead. Page 1, third paragraph, second line, there's a should that should become shall.
Item number 3?
Yes,
Oh, there it is.
second line. And probably, as far as I'm concerned, I can't think of any place where there's a remaining should that shouldn't be changed to a shall, so you should be able to just go global on each of these documents. Page 2. Last line, again, this isn't something that I object to, but I want to make sure it's what you want in here. Fifth, to maintain dunes at a particular height via dune scraping, I would say it probably ought to be by, but that's neither here nor there. In order to retain views of the ocean and to minimize sand blowing inland among properties where it can become an expensive nuisance. People happy with that?
Where's the sentence?
Where are you?
I'm sorry, very last line of page 2.
What's the sentence?
Fifth, to maintain dunes
At a particular height.
at a particular height by dune scraping in order to retain views of the ocean and to minimize sand blowing inland among properties where it can become an expensive nuisance.
So where's the sentence?
I beg your pardon?
That ain't a sentence.
Oh, there's a heading at the beginning of that. For dune management, for dune management is founded on 5 important objectives. First,
Okay.
these are,
I've got something way before that, though.
yeah, good.
Okay, I'm confused about the end of page 1, the sentence that starts on page 1 and continues on page 2. The plan allows grading to maintain views in the presidential streets and the breakers point sand management area shown in the maps of the same. Grading to maintain views outside of these 2 areas may be allowed subject to a comprehensive plan amendment. I think, and this has to do with, this is what I talked about before, having been approached and then thought about it, and it makes sense to me because I think that if you leave that the way it is, then you're opening the door to Chapman Point. And at this point, there's a deed restriction there that has to be handled in a totally different venue. And I think that that sentence sort of goes against that deed restriction. You're implying that that you could allow grading to mean, you know, there could be a change, a movement to change the comprehensive plan. The deed restriction has nothing to do with that comprehensive plan. It's a separate thing that would have to be
So
handled separately.
you could strike that sentence without doing any violence to that policy, I think.
Yeah.
But the reality is,
The reality is that you can always amend the comprehensive plan to allow dune grading in another area. That wouldn't change
I'm
that.
uncomfortable with that. I'm comfortable with Mark's suggestion.
What?
Do we
Strike
omit
that.
the sentence?
Strike that sentence, grading to maintain views may be allowed subject to a.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it wouldn't.
Okay, and then I think there was under A, under 10A, we have the same thing again. Including adjacent areas potentially affected. I don't, I'm concerned about that, including more than it should.
What would you recommend?
I don't know. I'm just concerned throughout this, that there is no sort of implicit permission in a way that you're making a promise that you can't keep, or that would backfire on you in some way. It concerns me.
But when we're talking about an entire beach, we're not talking about a management. You know, like it or not, you know, the area of the beach in front of Chapman Point development, no matter what the deed restrictions are, is part of the beach. And if activity within the management areas that permit grading or management of the dunes has consequences for other parts of the beach not included in the management units that are laid out here, I'm sorry, but that's affecting the beach. And I think the whole notion of managing the sand is tied to the beach, not to the management unit.
Well, then you're saying that if let's say, Chapman Point's views were further compromised because of action that took place at Breakers Point, that they should be allowed to.
No,
Well,
what I'm saying is that if something happens as a result of a management plan gone awry, people who own property that is some way damaged, you know, by
Well, damaged is,
a
okay.
load of sand, you know, falling in their, you know, yards or their houses
Sure.
or whatever, that there are consequences to that. In other words, the management planning unit and the dune management plan can't be allowed just to willy-nilly, you know, let whatever sand you're gonna get, you know, get moved.
I think
Permission to
that's the policy I think that what we have laid out is that it will.
I'm worried
I think
about
it's a
that
bad
all along.
idea, but I think that's what the,
So what happens then if Chapman Point, those houses feel like their view has been severely I'm not talking about dumping sand in their front yard or in their.
I know what you're saying, but see, I don't think that's an issue. You know, they signed off long ago on deed restrictions that basically said there ain't gonna be no dunes moved on the beach. But they didn't sign off on having a dune management plan for various management units of the beach that are defined as Cannon Beach or parts of Cannon Beach or whatever. They didn't sign off on the notion that, you know, we could be shoving sand every which way and that sand can fall into their laps. That sand can go north and make those dunes bigger, or it can go south and make them smaller. But ultimately, the dune management plan has to take into consideration the effects on the physical properties, not having anything to do with their views, because they've signed off on the views
Right.
a long time ago.
So I think that has to be clear. If you're talking about damage to their property, sand in their yard, sand in their doorway, sand in their windowsills, that's one thing. But I think we have to be very careful that this doesn't open the door or conflict in any way with that restriction. And I'm not sure it does.
No, I think that you're right about worrying about that.
Well,
I
I
don't
don't
have
want to
city
just
good-
worry about it, I want to
I
fix
know,
it.
I don't know, I don't have a language for you, but all I know is that I wouldn't want to have to defend it against somebody coming back after the city for approving a dune management plan that had the consequence of damaging people's houses and so forth.
Yeah, I understand. But this management area of breakers was in effect for quite a while. It's
Yeah.
not new. They've been doing this for a long time, and so when they signed that deed restriction, I think they knew what they were getting into.
It was a condition of the development,
What?
really,
But what was,
that deed restriction.
when did the deed restriction go into effect?
Or they-
In relationship to the beginning of the Breakers Point development?
After
Quite,
After.
quite a number of years
Breakers
after.
was in the 80s.
Yeah, Breakers
I
was
hadn't realized.
late 70s, early 80s, at Chapman Point, late 90s.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, quite a bit later. Just to be clear, policy 10 is talking about a policy you would evaluate a new management unit under. If, forget Chapman Point, anybody came in and wanted to say, hey, you don't allow dune grading in my area now, I want to, here's my plan, this is what you'd be evaluating against.
Oh,
So, but if that's not clear, maybe it needs to be made clear.
yeah, it's not clear to me.
Okay.
And I just have to ask, why is it says cover an entire beach and 4 dune area, and the breakers area doesn't do that?
The intent there is that, and that's something in the statewide planning goals, is to get around this parcel by parcel approach that had been used in other areas, notably Pacific City. And so they didn't want to have us issuing permits for a single 50 by 100 lot to do grading in their slot. But that begs the question of whether Breakers Point was properly or improperly evaluated under that. And if there's a way of changing that language to tighten that up without getting us to a parcel by parcel evaluation.
Boy, it kind of is a parcel by parcel, as it is now.
Well, we
Because
don't want to have each parcel be its own management unit. We want to be doing this in a logical,
But Breakers Point's a management unit.
But
Right, and it's a
I
collection.
understand a parcel is a building lot.
yeah, and that's the problem
Rather than
that
something like.
we're trying to
Breakers Point.
avoid. And Breakers Point is,
But this here, it's saying cover an entire beach and 4 dune area. So is that that Breakers Point isn't the entire beach and 4 dune area of
True.
no, but Rosenfeld's report convinced planning commissioners and the city council at the time that that was a logical management unit for them to deal with. There was a size and a scope that made sense against the statewide planning goals. This policy wasn't in effect at the time, but that's the gist of
political
it.
decision.
Well, I would like to think it was based on science, I don't know. But the intent is to make sure we aren't doing parcel by parcel plans.
Well, yeah,
and
nobody
permits.
wants to do it
Right.
by lot. I mean, that's not even-
And I don't know if the answer
what
is
we're talking
to
about.
fine tune that entire beach language or something else, but I don't think we want to just strike it entirely. I think we might want something
Right,
else in
because
there.
it seems like it's weird because
Yeah.
of the way the situation is.
Well, I mean, if we address it as within Cannon Beach city limits, or would that,
And I think there are two things going on. One is where is the dune grading going to be allowed? And the second is wherever that dune grading is going to be allowed, you need to look at the adverse impacts that exist outside of where the dune grading is. And the intent, I think, of A was to say, you got to look at adjacent areas potentially affected by changes in flooding, erosion, and all the rest. it's not to allow additional grading somewhere else, it's to say, don't just look at the management unit with blinders on about what's happening next to it. It's to get those adverse effects.
That's good,
And-
so
Yeah,
is there a
it's,
better way to say it?
it's in
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
avoiding or minimizing
doesn't-
grading or difference.
It doesn't read that way to me. It's,
This
Yeah.
has more teeth.
what you said
than
made
what
sense.
Uh,
What is written here
Yeah.
doesn't sound to me like what you just said.
And,
well, we're clearly not going to get to a final solution tonight, but maybe we can come back and, I mean, I think I get a feel for what you're saying. And I think we should be able to modify this language that I hope moves it in that direction.
yeah,
So I guess give us a chance to take
Oh, sure,
a shot at
sure.
that and let's bring it back.
In light of that, since it's now 8:30 and there are 2 other items of business, could I suggest that we consider continuing this activity to the end of attachment D and going to the other subjects that we've got on the agenda and coming back and revisiting that issue and also attachment E next month. What do you think? I was really hoping to get this off the table tonight, but if we're not, I would like to see it. I think the other two are not going to take as long. So, actually, who knows about the conservative limit?
So, yeah,
I'm just-
that works as far as our schedule goes.
On this page, I have something else.
Please.
Forge ahead here.
Okay.
It says that, now, this is just a question, I'm not sure what the answer is. It's number 12. The city's forwarding management program seeks a balance between the 5 objectives listed. We know what those 5 are, 'cause we've gone over them ad nauseum. But what happens if you can't reach a balance? Is there, I'm serious.
No,
Are
absolutely.
those objectives listed in order of importance? Or not?
We never say so, but there has certainly been a suggestion that at least the 5th one is 5th among equals.
Well, I don't know. I'm asking the question because it may be that you can't balance. Oh, maybe you cannot balance objective 4, preserving the beauty and integrity of the dunes, with objective 5, which is to preserve views. What happens in the case where you can't balance those objectives? There has to be some kind of hierarchy of objectives, it seems, in order to make it work.
Well, actually, I don't know if there needs to be a hierarchy. If you can't balance those objectives, I think you're denying a permit. Because those are reflected in conditional use criteria also.
Okay.
So I say the applicant can't convince you that they're giving you a balanced approach here, you're probably looking at a denial.
And can we say that somewhere?
Well, these get implemented through conditional use criteria, and it's pretty clear there that, and maybe it needs to be clearer, but that you either meet these criteria or you fail to get a permit. And that this is a subjective judgment on your part, the kind of judgments that you make. And
Right.
if you can't,
I guess
if they can't persuade you they've met the criteria,
what I would like to
We
see
vote against
12 say is the city's forwarding management program seeks a balance between the 5 objectives listed in policy 14. If it is determined that a balance cannot be met or cannot be established, then the permit would be denied. Because I mean, you say that it's clear in the,
yeah.
but I don't think it's that clear to someone just reading this.
Yeah, no, that's-
In other words, someone who isn't sitting on the planning commission were to read through this, trying to determine what's what. I think that needs to be said.
Yeah, I think we said in 12 or 14. Probably 12 is the logical place for it.
Yeah, there's more room.
Yeah, if nothing else. Yeah, that's a change we can make.
Or another place you could put, I'm sorry, actually, at the very end of 14, it actually would make sense. Because it
Oh,
says
yeah.
a balance must be struck between these competing objectives. If it is not possible to strike a balance, the conditional use permit may be denied.
Shall be.
Shall be.
Yeah,
Thank you. Shall, will,
yep,
may.
that's a
shall.
good, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's.
And it's
that's
consistent
nice.
with the way we've set up
It
the
is.
ordinance end of it.
Is everyone agreement on that?
You know, and I think in terms of our earlier discussion of effects on adjacent properties and so forth, it might be useful to revisit the Oregon beaches and dunes guidelines to bring in where it reads, avoiding or minimizing grading disposition, which could adversely affect surrounding properties by changing wind, ocean erosion, or flooding patterns. In other words, there's a pretty clear indication there that whatever plan you have, you know, is not approved when you are going to, it's shown that you're going to be affecting adjacent properties. And I think that maybe we need to be a little clearer in the language about that.
Do you see that as an additional policy, or is there a policy?
He was talking back up on 10 when we were going through 10.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he said,
look at the
look
end
at
of-
guidance.
Yeah.
In that.
Guidelines,
Yeah.
that's, you know, that may mean things like you may have to put up some kind of sand fence or something to keep the sand from going away if you take away a large dune that's doing that service right now.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes some sense to incorporate that language into 10.
Okay. Okay, we move on to page 3. At the very end of page 3 is one of the places where I think we need to incorporate that language like we encountered before about what happens until monitoring reports are complete and up to date, and then you and for 5 years after that. Or whatever, like the time, 5 years seems like a long time to me, but, you know, whatever. like
We,
the time
if
you
you look
want.
back at the minutes, that's exactly what we all agreed on. Permit makes a motion for a penalty of 5 years with no additional permits if the monitoring is not kept up to date, and it passed,
Yep.
you voted for it.
Okay. Minutes rule. Okay, but in any event, I think, that's one of the places that other than making these legible, I don't think we got, unless anybody's got any comments on 4 and 5.
Oh, there are we again?
Okay. You got something else on 3?
Yes.
Oh, good.
On for-dune management,
Mhm.
it says monitoring of for-dune grading permits is mandatory. Monitoring shall be the responsibility of the applicant. I don't think it is. I think it's the city, right?
Well, again, if that could be clear, but the way I would like to set this up is that the applicant is responsible for hiring an expert to do the monitoring, the heavy lifting part of the
Can we
monitoring.
say that then the city
Yeah,
will
that should be fleshed out here. That's a good place for it.
will hire their own monitor?
To monitor, monitor.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody, other than making them legible, anybody got anything to say about pages 4 and 5? I guess those are actually the same diagrams as we have in other places, but
They're a little bigger, but they still need to be legible. They don't reproduce well. There's too much gray on that page. That's
that's
a graphic thing we can fix.
yeah. Okay, is it acceptable for us to put off attachment E and the issue of cover the entire beach and how we're dealing with that? We still need to revisit that, right?
Yeah,
We made some,
there's enough changes in there. This really needs to come back to you.
okay. Okay, so that's continued.
And can we have a break?
Yes, please.
Yes, Deb.
What's that?
It's always a season.
Yeah. They're manageable, no.
Tree removal.
This one is yours. I'm not sure. Take it with me or something. That's something, because here's mine.
Uh,
Is this yours?
I would like to
15
do
others. There's 20 of them.
something like what we were just doing, starting with attachment C. The idea, as I recall, was that we get a copy of the final version in front of us without a bunch of colors on it, distracting us. Unfortunately, when I went through this yesterday, I made more changes, and which Mark has incorporated in the handout.
Yeah, I just put something that looks like this in front of each of you.
With the timing better.
Yeah, and part of that's because it's on the next pages it shows those changes.
Oh, the changes are listed.
Yeah, these are not changes you made last month. These are changes that Bob discovered when we talked earlier this
Are you
week.
talking, are they substantive changes?
Yeah, you had directed me to make one change in particular that I just neglected to incorporate here. Bob pointed it out to me. That spawned a couple other changes too.
That
So
we
that's-
had actually asked for?
You had asked for,
You know?
and I had not implemented
Oh.
in the version C that was sent to you.
And
Well,
do this.
I can walk you through it pretty quick.
Okay.
So the first change has no substantive changes. The meat of the change, if you look on page 2, it talks about showing trees 6 dBH or larger on adjoining properties and 6 dBH or larger on adjoining street right-of-ways. What I believe you had asked me to do, and I neglected to do, was this. In most cases, or in many cases, the applicant will come in with a report from a professional arborist, which will identify trees that could potentially be impacted. Those are the ones you have to show on the plan, clearly on your site, but also on adjoining property and the adjoining street right-of-way. But there are going to be cases where either the project is too small to justify hiring an arborist, and in that case, we would just go with the geometric method, which is the tree protection unit, as a measurement of trees that might be affected. So that's what those two sections are attempting to do, and that gets carried forward in some other analogous sections. The other thing I've done, if you turn to the last page, is this question about kind of redefining DBH everywhere it appears. And rather than do that, I just created a definition of DBH, moved it to the definitions of the zoning ordinance, and now it's kind of expunged from those two, the tree removal ordinance and the design review ordinance and the general requirements section, and instead just appears as a definition, and we just refer to DBH in here. So those are the two things that are different from the attachment C that you have in front of you. The rest of the material is, I believe, brought forward the way we discussed at the September meeting. I should also add that Jan Siebert-Warman and I had a discussion about this on Monday or Tuesday, I can't remember now. Tuesday, and she pointed this out to me, and I had urged her, I said, I can't make a change on your direction here. You need to either bring this up with the planning commissioners individually, because the hearing is now closed, or wait till the city council matter brings up this. Instead, Bob brought it up to me, so it's now before you. But I would say that Jan did discover this clearly earlier than I did. And I put a copy of this in front of you too. And I believe this was the point she was trying to make with me too. The other thing I've mentioned to both Chairman Lundy and the city manager is there's no clock running on this, so if this is incomprehensible to you or more than you can care to deal with at 8:45, again, there's no clock running, you can reschedule this for next month.
I'd love to see it next month. I think we're burned out right now.
I was just on a joke. I thought I was going to have supper before this, and failed to leave time to. I got stuck on the first batch of freight, because I think I would be in favor of that, just shoving this one more down the road. I think we can do it.
Take it home and reread it and see if I actually did capture what you intended last month. And if it is, then we can take this up, you can take this up next month and move forward. And if not, we can get this fixed hopefully before next month so we can wrap this up.
So I still have one question. Why don't we just say 4.5 feet, period? You know, the DBH stuff drives me nuts, because it isn't really a standard. You know, my chest and, someone else's chest is not the same height.
Well, and you're right.
I know, and you've got the little footnote, I see the footnote. But is there something in the business that decides that?
Exactly that.
All right. I'll cave to the professionals.
Okay. Do we want to remind me whether we have a good reason to go ahead and, in contrast with, deal with the short-term rental
What-
issue tonight?
I really would like to at least explain the basis for why this is coming to you and what you're going to be looking at when you do get to hearings on this. Because this is not coming to you the same route most of the other material you have is before you, if that's all right.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so this was advertised as a work session. This originated in a series of city council work sessions on short-term rentals. Short-term rental matters have been before the city council on a pretty regular basis for, I'll say my entire tenure here, 6 years at least. If you'll remember, a couple of years ago, you adopted some amendments to the short-term rental ordinance. They were primarily, almost exclusively procedural and kind of name-changing. And Tammy Herdner, our attorney at the time, worked real closely with Alicia Gregory, who was the administrative assistant who handled this, to try to streamline some of the things in the ordinance that weren't working well administratively, both for us and for the community of property managers. When the council adopted those and considered them, they also said, we like the idea of you looking at the procedures here, we want to look at some substantive measures too. And that spawned a second series of work sessions that looked at substantive measures. Most recently, when the council met, and I'll stress that there was no vote on this, and there was not unanimity on this. They asked me to generate 3 amendments, and those are the 3 that are in front of you. The first one would eliminate the 5-year permit program, which is approximately, our program has 3 components. There's 3 different kinds of permits. The 5-year program is one of them. That's a lottery awarded permit that allows unlimited hotel-like use of a short-term rental unit. And those are awarded through a random number drawing. That's why we call it the lottery thing. And they're good for 5 years. They get put back in the pool and awarded to the next drawing number. The council members asked me to draft up an ordinance that would delete it. The ordinance language here would phase it out over the 5-year period. In about 5 years, you would have expired all those and just not rewarded them. That's the first part. The second part deals with another part of our permit program called the 14-day permit program. The bulk of the short-term rental units, about half of them are in this program, and that allows you to rent for your short-term rental unit to one occupancy group every 14 days. And the reason, there's 2 reasons for the council to ask me to change that to 2 occupancy groups per month. One is that they're both related. One is that the 14-day rule, while I understand it, I don't think a lot of people in a lot of permit holders do not, and a lot of elected officials do not. It's a complicated concept, although I've been explaining it in simple terms. It spawns most of our violations. To the extent we have arguments with permit holders, they are inevitably over this. And it's confusing to explain to judges in court. It's confusing to explain to city council members when they ask about this. And they repeatedly says, why don't we just go to two times a month? That's what it means, right? Well, it doesn't mean it, but it might be close enough. So that's the second amendment. The third amendment is a little different. The council, I had explained to the council, and it's a true statement, that most of our violations and enforcement problems come from self-managed units, not professional managed units. Roughly half of our units are professionally managed. That is, they hire a management company to do all the work, and the owner owns the unit, holds the permit, and is ultimately responsible, but it's the management company that's actually doing the work. Management companies generate very few enforcement problems or violations. They understand the 14-day rule. They understand all of our requirements. We have a good working relationship with the management companies. Those are not much of a problem in terms of enforcement or administration. Most of our problems come from self-managed units. And I had this conversation with the city council, and we had a number of kind of responses. One was, let's require everybody to be professionally managed. Let's require anybody in a violation situation be professionally managed. Let's require people who are new to the program and have never had a permit before to be professionally managed. There are practical problems and unintended consequences with any of those approaches. So I went with a much lower key version of that, which is if somebody is in a violation situation, they can elect at their option to go into professional management and put those violations in abeyance. And if they are violation free for a period of time, those prior violations would fall off the table. And if they aren't, they would be reactivated. And that would be the advantage there is that we're not forcing somebody to do that. It's still at their option. If that person wants to just take their medicine and take their, say, a 30-day suspension, they don't have to be professionally managed. So that was the thinking there. I want to make it clear that many of our self-managed units are well managed. There are people who really pay a lot of attention to it, do a good job, are not a problem, are extremely diligent about it, are deep into this and really have a good understanding of it. So I don't want to denigrate all the self-managed units. I just want to denigrate a small subset of them.
And isn't it true that if they're out of compliance, this is the only way you would know is if someone ratted them out, one of the neighbors?
No, we usually find this out. Yeah, well, that's one way. The other way we find out is in the audit. We require an annual audit of all of our short-term rental permit holders, and we examine those, and that's when we find typically 14-day violations. We also try to match up room tax receipts with those audits to make sure that they're plausibly matching up.
How's that being paid under the table?
That's a possibility. I guess the third problem, or the third element that we haven't talked much about is the council authorized, and we've already contracted with a firm to help us identify unlicensed units. That's, it's entirely outside the program. That's kind of a different subject, and our goal is to get them in the program and licensed and pay their penalties and their back taxes if we need to. But these changes aren't really addressing that problem. They're addressing these three things that the council wants addressed. As I said before, the short-term rental ordinance is embedded in the zoning ordinance, and although you never hear appeals on short-term rental permits or sort of administrative permit issuance, permit denial, violations, they just don't go to you the way the code is set up. Amendments to the ordinance do go to you because they're in the zoning ordinance. So this is what the council has asked us to do, send a package of amendments to you, hold hearings on them, make a recommendation to them. In preparation for that, I scheduled this work session. I've had a meeting with the short-term rental management companies, which we do periodically anyway to just alert them to this type of thing and to get feedback from them on things that are happening on their side of the table. That's why many people are here tonight for this. They know that this isn't a hearing, so they know that there's not any testimony tonight, but I did recommend that they come so they could kind of know they can hear what you're hearing, and they can calibrate their testimony to what kind of questions you're asking, what you're receiving from me. We would also, when we get to the hearing, notify the management companies and all permit holders. So I would expect a fairly robust hearing, some interest in this. All three of these amendments, if they go through the way they do, have consequences. I mean, there's substantive changes to the program, so they do merit quite a bit of attention. As opposed to the procedural changes that we did a couple of years ago that made life a little easier for staff, these have impact outside City Hall, it's a little bit broader. So
They have an impact on the whole health of neighborhoods.
yeah, and that's, I think that's the point of why the council really wants to look at keeping this program under a fairly tight rein. So that's the substance of what I wanted to say tonight. If there's anything in particular you want to see from staff in preparation for the hearing, I would say ask it of us now. If you, unless you tell me otherwise, we would probably advertise this for hearing in November.
November, next month?
Yeah, next month.
And the same time that we're doing the, going over the,
We haven't pulled the trigger on that. If you want to push that to December or even January, you can.
well, I'm just concerned because, you know, it'll end up like tonight. Whatever comes from now on tonight's gonna get short shrift, believe me, because we're all, at least I'm burned out.
That's telling me that we should probably push this to December then.
Yeah, and get rid of the dune management thing, get that gone and done, finish
Maybe we can get
it.
tree removal off too, so yeah.
Finish it.
So,
And then be able to really concentrate on this, because I think this is really important too.
okay,
Yeah.
so let's push this to the December hearing and
And
I
this-
will advertise it accordingly
And that's the one right around Christmas, but we're gonna have it on Tuesday, right? That's what we decided, I believe, Tuesdays.
no, that's the November hearing. It would move to Tuesday.
November's the Tuesday.
Yeah,
right.
I think the December one comes at a more reasonable time. Do you have the calendar handy?
The 27th?
December 27? So we'll need to have that advertising queued up. You could still change it at your November meeting. So,
I just want to make sure everyone has a
Yeah.
chance to come. And a lot of people,
Well,
I don't know. I don't know how that works.
then I guess I would tentatively schedule it for December, but you know that you could, at your November meeting, say, no, let's move it to January, if that's you would still have time to do that.
All right.
So you were talking about the 14-day permit being changed to a twice a month. Is that happening? I mean, I just cruised through.
That's the proposal that you'll have to
These
hold a
three things are
hearing
just
on.
proposals that we've got to discuss, and there's going to be a meeting on it.
Yeah, and that has an interesting consequence, and this is one of the things I learned from meeting with the short-term rental management companies. They book things way out in advance. They're already booking things in the summer of 2019 and even beyond, so there's kind of has to be this kind of long tail for the 14-day and a gear up for the twice a month, and there's going to be this long period where both are in effect, because I don't want to punish somebody who's following our rules now, booking in the summer of 2019. And I'm sure that's not what the council's intention is. So it's one of the things I'm saying is that there's a long implementation measure from that, because I think we need to protect people who acted in good faith and in accordance with our current ordinances.
Yeah.
So that's why I mean these are not quite as simple as they seem. They all have some kind of hidden things and some consequences that are a little difficult to predict, but I'm sure you'll get lots of testimony on them.
And is there any, do you have any statistics or anything about the efficiency of the management companies or anything to back it up?
I can give you kind of sort of a summary of violations that we've prosecuted prosecuted is the wrong word, violations we've handled over the last couple of years. We've prosecuted a couple, but just and generally how we've, the kind of matrix that shows how many violations we've handled, how many are self-managed, how many are professional.
Yeah, I'd like
Yeah,
to
that's
see that.
data we can, it's fairly reasonably easy to come up with. If at any time between now and soon, you can, if there's some data or some statistics that'll might help inform your opinion, contact Jeff. And we have a lot of data on this, so we can put that together for you.
So do we have a lot of complaints?
Yeah, this is something that generates a fair number of complaints. There's kind of two classes of complaints, I guess I'm going to say. One are the kinds that come to Jill and I, or Alton, and they're, my neighbor's short-term rental had 8 cars parked in front of my house. They didn't put away their garbage can. There's a lot of noise last night. I think these people are renting every weekend, those kinds of complaints. And then there are the generalized complaints that may or may not come to you, but they certainly come to city council members. Why are there so many short-term rentals in my neighborhood? That type of complaint. So yeah, there are complaints on both fronts, both the specific to a permit and general about the program.
Could
How-
we be provided a map that would show
Yeah, we have a map.
where all of the
Yep. Yeah, actually, we've already done that, so.
short-term and
Mhm.
to just see how they're dispersed?
Mhm.
Yeah. Another question I have is, when they're registering someone, they get their name, their home address, their phone number, number of tenants, date of the rental period. Do they also ask, and maybe the property managers would be the ones to answer that, but do they also get license plate numbers?
We used to ask for that, and the feedback we got was twofold. One is the police chief has said, from an enforcement point of view, if we want license numbers, we're going to go out and collect them ourselves. And the managers have said, often when people book their vacation rentals, you're going to be renting a car at the airport, and they don't know what the license number is until they actually check in. And we'll sometimes leave it, sometimes not. And you certainly know that, and some of you may know that many times people check into these places, never see the manager, management company, for instance, or the owner. There's an arrangement made over the internet, the booking's made, the credit card bill is paid, a key code is given, they punch in, they punch out, and there is no face-to-face interaction. That's not always true, but that's certainly sometimes true. So the license plate number we found was, not important enough for us to collect, because we thought we were collecting it for sort of enforcement complaint purposes, but in turns, the police chief said, I don't need it. And it was difficult for managers and owners to collect in some situations, so we dropped that from our requirements.
And is Airbnb and VRBO considered management companies?
No.
Or-
They don't have a local presence, and under our code, to be a manager here, you have to have a local presence. That means an office, brick and mortar office in Seaside, Cannon Beach, within 10 miles of Cannon Beach, which includes Seaside and Arch Cape.
So how do you control, how in the world can that be controlled if places are rented out through Airbnb or?
Well, they still can be rented out through Airbnb or Vrbo, but they still have to have a local management entity. And that management entity might be a company like Cannon Beach Vacation Rentals, or it might, in some cases, might be the housekeeping company.
Oh, so they contract with them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
you'll hear this from management companies that, and this was actually not clear to me before I heard from them, that those Airbnb, those websites that you think of are often front ends that go back to these management companies. When you make a reservation through there, it may actually be going back to one of the vacation management companies here. It's a more complicated business than I would have ever thought. But it does make sense when you have somebody explain it to you.
Yeah,
So the local presence, can that be your next door neighbor who happens to be a year-long?
It can be, and that's one of the things we wanted to, where the council has asked us to do, and we intend to do, is a lot of times you have to have a local rep. You don't have to have a professional management company, but if you don't live here, you have to have a local representative, and so people often will ask their neighbor to do it, and that's a reasonable thing to do. And one of the things we've suggested and the council has agreed to is that we need to test that, and that is, this is your local rep. We're going to call them quarterly to make sure they still know that they're your local rep and that they still live here. We've had some relationships where we contact a local rep and they say, well, news to me, and that's not what we want. So we're looking at kind of tightening that up.
don't you have to sign something to say that you are?
You do, but people forget it after the first year, and occasionally we only learn that people, local reps have moved away when somebody tries to call them. So we've been too loose on that, I guess is the point. And so the council has agreed that we should kind of test that periodically and just call them and make sure they understand they're still the local rep, make sure the phone actually rings somewhere.
Do I understand that we're not going to do anything on this in November, and that in December, we're going to have this
I will not.
deferred discussion, and we're going to have public testimony?
Well, if you just direct us to, I think we would advertise the hearing for December. And you could, at your November meeting, say, no, December looks too ugly, let's push it off to January. There would be enough time.
My intuition is that 2 days after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year's, is not going to be a good time to expect people to.
And I think
You
you're
know,
going
to
to
say,
get
well, you had your opportunity 2
Right.
days after
a
Christmas.
lot of complaints about that. A lot of people will feel
Okay.
disenfranchised.
Yeah.
Let's call it January then.
Yeah, also, I think a lot of the people that we'd like to have here, the property managers, will be exhausted. Because they'll be working so hard during the holidays.
Yeah, I just want to get at least this on the agenda because we have to schedule quite a ways out. So let's
Yeah.
tentatively
January
put it down for
sounds
January. That makes
Good.
it, that's
So
doable.
we are not at this point expecting to be doing anything on this in either November or December.
That's the way I would see it,
Understand that
yeah.
correctly?
But
Okay.
you should
Except
really,
getting information.
yeah, if
Except
you
that if- Sure. yeah.
look this over, get back to
Right.
Jeff or I, and if you need additional data needs, you mentioned the violation statistics and the map of STR permits. If there are other things like that that'll help you frame this up, by all means, get us that request so we can start compiling.
Good.
Can I just ask one question about part of this? It says on page 3 of 3, the potential benefits of a 30 to 60-day permit grace period from when a short-term rental property is sold to avoid disrupting previously made reservations. Is that really a burden of the city, or is that more of a situation that should be between the owner and the management company?
I'm not seeing where this is.
Where?
It is the third bullet,
On
out-
what page?
public outreach,
What page?
3 of 3.
Would that be A? Let's see, page
Attachment
no.
C.
This is under attachment B, maybe?
Attachment.
It's, it's,
What's it look like?
Yeah, I'm not seeing.
Oh, here it is. Public
at the
outreach.
bottom it says attachments, current
So
short-term
it's-
rental ordinance.
This
and
is your
potential
staff report.
changes.
Keep
Second
going.
bullet. This
Oh, this is
attachment
this-
C.
This is the city council staff report, yeah.
Okay, now, we're on
Sorry,
the last piece of paper
yeah.
of this
Yeah.
amendment. And what was your question again?
I guess I'd like to have an explanation of this 30 to 60-day grace period.
Yeah, that gets to the situation where, and this comes up, I don't know, not often, but 2 or 3 times a year. Property, a rental, short-term rental unit is sold, and the permit is issued to the owner. And so the new owner needs to apply for a permit. And they're diligent about getting it in, but it sometimes takes us 30 days to process a permit just because of the pile of paperwork we've got in front of it. Kind of put them in the queue. And I've had this discussion many times with both the management companies and the realtors, holy cow, there's somebody who's already made a reservation in there. They made it a year ago. What do I tell them? And I tell them that if you made that reservation in good faith, I will not violate you for it. But I certainly have no authority to do that. And that's what I'm trying to do, is try to protect somebody who has a legitimate reservation on a legitimate short-term rental permit. The property gets sold, we're gonna require a new permit, but there is a gap in between when property is transferred and the old permit is void and before we can issue that new permit. And it's typically I mean, I try to move those in a couple of weeks, but it could be 30 days, it could be 60 days. Our ordinance allows 90 days, we don't normally do that. That's what I was looking at there, is to protect people who did things in good faith and are not violating the ordinance, but for our inability to process the paperwork quickly. And as I said, I already do that anyway, but I don't have any authority to do that, and it makes me nervous talking about it in a recorded conversation in front of our attorneys, so.
You're retired anyway.
Yeah, what can they do, fire me?
And I guess one last thing is, why haven't we already aligned the fire code or the confirmation of having 10 people in?
It would be useful to do that. Alton Butler, our building official, already does that when we do, he does an inspection. So it, honestly, it only applies to a couple of units that are that big. And there's a grandfathered situation that he has to evaluate under the state building code.
So he could allow more people in?
Well, actually, the reverse is more likely. He's going to allow fewer people to require them to sprinkler the unit. So I don't feel badly that that's not in our code, because it applies to such a small number and it's covered by our building official. I wouldn't mind amending the code to take care of that, just to line them up so that everybody knows what part of the ball field they're on, but the council did not direct me to bring that forward to you, so that's why it's not part of this package.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for listening to me on that. I'm glad we were able to get it out. I feel badly that I brought a bunch of people into the room and it's too late for a longer discussion on this.
Okay, anybody other than me have a question about the tree report? I gave my question to Mark and we'll get back together.
I remember the permit, but I don't remember enough about it. I'll have to look it up.
Ongoing planning items? Other than the fact that we're meeting a couple days early next month, so we don't meet on Thanksgiving.
Correct.
Okay. Good the order?
Tuesday the 20th.
Oh, I just wanted to say real quickly, because I don't think our new person has heard that my constant harping about Nicholson, if there's anything new on it, or he's up to speed on it, or what happened and how it came about, and what the results were, and how there hasn't been enough monitoring going on.
Yeah, he has now sold 3 of the 4 lots, only owns 1. I guess that last sale is closed. When we last spoke about it, I was in the process, but now I think it's closed. They did, as I mentioned, they did the planting on the wall. They got lucky that rain fell when it did. And when I last was out there, it looked like they had pretty good survivability.
Ivy, isn't it?
No, they couldn't plant English ivy. There was some
That's what it looked like.
slough and can't remember what else it was now, but not English ivy. So unless something unusual happens, they got through the tough period and they're likely to make it now. If nobody comes in and builds a house there in the next, let's say, 8 or 10 months, this time next year, somebody's going to have to be irrigating that. And it's, at this point, the responsibility of all the lot owners, Jeff Nicholson being the owner of 1 lot, and I can't remember the people who own the others right offhand. Oh, the neighboring property owner, the Georges own one of them too. So they're going to be responsible for that, and it has to be irrigated. There is no irrigation system installed, so we're talking about hoses and sprinklers that are deployed, particularly during the dry months. I've driven Jeff by this.
There are dry months.
Drier months. I drove Jeff by this, but it was on a blizzard tour of the entire city. I doubt that he remembers it.
We'll remind you.
Yeah, we'll meet him up there in short.
Yes. Go to the order? Okay. See you next time.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Did we do the authorization to sign the
Oh, did we
order?
get the authorization? Do we have any orders?
That Larry, do we need to sign Larry?
Yeah, just have Bob sign it.
Okay, and so no, we don't have to do the, who made a motion and who?
Hey!
I mean, the outcome of the decision is made and it's on the record.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
You do. I might have a procedural answer, but if not,
Jeff, this is Lisa Fisk.
31st when we meet?
Yes.
Oh.
I'll even buy the first round.
What?
Well, I didn't do it. I brought it up. It wasn't signed. In Seattle. We've signed for it.
Okay, you bet.
Got most of it.
Wow. The first 10 minutes discussing page one.
They're always saying Mexico or something.
So yeah, this isn't
let me
done.
just find out for you. My son's
It's
dad.
It's
closer.
getting there. It's getting closer and closer.
We made it past page 3.
Yeah, I've got everything else, the permits. The business license. So the permits all signed.
Do you know Bill Kavaisman, our planning?
Oh, you sure look familiar.
Oregon Shores Days, back a while ago. I remember,
There's a piece there that I missed.
you know, I'm no longer involved in them.
You're not?
Yeah, yeah,
It's just been most of it for Tillamook County, but a lot of Tillamook Estuary Partnership also.
yeah.
And I don't know if there are any other stops in there that I'm
No,
aware of.
those two.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we do,
Stints is married now.
and I'll tell you more about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like, I kept looking at him, I'm like, I know him. Wow.
Yeah,
It's a grand.
yeah.
It's been a long time.
It has been.
Yeah.
She won't be.
Have you been the
because
attorney
she's
here
on
for
my
a
list
long
of
time?
renewals forever.
About 6 years?
Longer than that, because I've been here 6 years.
Well, originally it was sort of, you know, got plugged into, I think it started with the Stevens case, you know,
I will do it.
Yeah.
one of those times you got sued, and then you
Well, I
know,
mean,
something else came out with something
I'll do
else,
it
and
before
then Tammy Herdner was your.
I usually go to
former
the
city.
Yep.
Yeah, city.
That's usually when
I don't really like
let me out of the
that.
office. to run.
You know what you're doing, why don't you do it?
That's a weird thing for someone to say.
Turns out Tammy doesn't even like Bill.
No,
In November, and the 12 days of cookies, and at least twice during the 12 days of cookies, I delivered to
I have not been as much present until recently, started coming down to planning commission meetings.
Because then it's this.
Well, this 40 minutes.
So, maybe some raspberry or.
Okay, all right. We'll let you make it up then.
All right, I will see you in the morning.